Pokemon is a franchise I was obsessed with as a child, and when I say I was obsessed with Pokemon, I mean it. That massive Pokemon fad from the 90s hit me like a train in 2003. I was watching the anime most mornings and after school, I collected hundreds of trading cards despite never understanding how they functioned, and I had every Pokemon video game on my Nintendo 64. My memory about that period is a bit foggy, but one thing I remember clearly is that I got a Game Boy Advance and Pokemon Sapphire on my 6th birthday, and immediately it became my favorite video game of all time. A title it still carries to this day, and likely a title it will carry forever. On the internet, it seems uncommon for people to have one of their first games ever remain their favorite as an adult. Obviously, people's tastes change as they get exposed to more games, but a lot of us are nostalgic toward the earliest games we experienced. After all, when you're a kid, you usually only had a handful of games to pick from, and since we're more impressionable at a young age, our experiences and victories felt more significant back then. And my victories from Pokemon Sapphire resonated in a way that games I played before couldn't produce. The game challenged me many times, but the rewards for defeating difficult sections always encouraged me to keep trying. Rewarding not just mentally or with a shiny trinket, but with the opportunity to explore more of the world. The Hoenn region was one of the most wonder-filled locations I've ever immersed myself in. Every route, every city, no matter how trivial, had an atmosphere that excited me, that made me want to go there myself. And then there's the Pokemon. Sapphire is one of only 2 Pokemon generations where I got to discover the new Pokemon firsthand. Something that's lessened my enjoyment of the franchise is that I like to know what the new Pokemon are before the game releases, so I can plan my team for the first playthrough. It's a method I prefer, but getting the opportunity to experience a Pokemon game completely blind is something I'll miss. Another reward for completing challenging sections was getting to discover the next route's wild Pokemon, and encountering a trainer with a Pokemon I'd never seen before. It was thrilling searching through the Pokedex after a battle to see where on the map that elusive Pokemon's habitat is, and then going on a scavenger hunt for one. I've never had another game fulfill my sense of awe and discovery like Sapphire, and in this video, I want to show you why it's my favorite video game of all time. Like I said, I got Pokemon Sapphire along with a Game Boy Advance on my 6th birthday, but I wasn't the first person to boot up the game. While I was busy playing Super Mario Advance 4, my sister stole Sapphire and got to the first gym in Rustboro City. And while I was upset, the truth is that her progress was really important. I reset her file, but looming in the back of my head was her starter and the city's stone roads. So upon starting the game, we're introduced to Professor Birch, who asks if we're a boy or a girl. Call me nostalgia blind, but these two are the best designed protagonists the series has ever seen, and I'm not gonna lie, but it's just because of the boy's hat. I've never seen a hat that looks like this, so at the time, I assumed he had white hair, which was pretty badass. Forget the fact that you can see his real hair underneath on most sprites, the hat without a doubt made this game engaging before it even started. And the girl design, while lacking a sick hat, is still memorable to me, but a lot of credit for that goes to the anime, since she was a main character during this generation of the show, but I'm choosing the boy. We then get our first glimpse of the game's world. Our character is standing inside a truck full of boxes because her family just moved to Littleroot Town, and I need to take another moment to address how unique the start is, since most Pokemon games, before and after, start in your bedroom. But the truck always sticks out to me because A, it's a location you can never revisit, not that you'd want to. Okay, maybe I want to. And B, it's like, steps on grass, slicks back white hair, my conquest has begun. But you start things out by visiting your bedroom and setting a clock your dad bought for the occasion. Like, what? I didn't have a clock before, but the clock is important because the game features mechanics and events that run on a 24-hour rotation. Inside the cartridge is a battery that allows the game to constantly know what time it is, but after roughly 7 years, the battery dies and time freezes. It's a step up from the last generation where the save gets erased when the battery dies, but it sucks because replacing the battery isn't exactly easy. I never replaced my battery when it died, but since I want to delve into as much as I can in this video, I dug out my dad's solder and swapped them out. And I'm no handyman, but somehow I broke the game during installation. Like, it wouldn't start, or if it did, the game crashed after a minute. That gave me anxiety, but I took it out, tried again, and now we're back in business. Me keeping this dead battery is like a guy keeping his removed testicle in a jar. So returning to the game, the first thing to do is visit the professor who was expecting us, but he's not in his lab. Uh-oh, roadblock. One thing I'm really guilty of is not talking to NPCs or going into buildings, and since I was 6 at the time, I would usually mash through the text without reading it, so I spent a good, half hour figuring out where to go, since the only way out is blocked by a kid who tells you it's dangerous outside, and the professor's daughter leaves once you talk to her. And it took me forever to realize I could just walk past the kid once there's actual danger 10 feet away. Yeah, okay. But we find the professor has been cornered by a wild Pokemon, and the only way we can save him is to fight it using a Pokemon from inside the professor's bag. And this is where we get to choose our starter, our companion for the rest of the game. There's Treecko, a grass type, Torchic, a fire type, and Mudkip, a water type. Knowing my affinity for Yoshi at the time, it makes sense that I would pick Treecko, since the two look very similar. But when my sister stole Sapphire, she chose Torchic. Before I started the game for myself, I watched her use Torchic's evolution, Combusken, decimate Pokemon with its double kick attack. Not to mention, Combusken's long claws made it look fearsome, so I had to pick Torchic to get that beast under my control. Mudkip, the third option, isn't a Pokemon I hate by any means, it just has the third best design. So we save the professor and return to his lab. He lets us keep Torchic, then asks us to see his daughter in Route 103. Look man, I'm sure she's sweet, but I'm already late for my conquest. See my fucking daughter! So we head that way and find her facing the trees like a total psychopath. Considering this was my first Pokemon game and that this was the first battle against a trainer, I really appreciated that the game lets you walk through the grass and level up if you want to. The caveat, if you want to call it one, is that if you weren't expecting a battle with May, your health will likely be lowered from training, putting you in a disadvantage. It made me over-reliant on Pokemon Centers. Instead of carrying around some potions, I would just backtrack to the Pokemon Center because it was free. And mentally, you tend to avoid things you don't understand, like what the hell is a pot ion? I'm not giving that to my Torchic. But I beat May and we head back to Littleroot, and during this trek we get to experience one of my favorite design tropes in Pokemon games. In a lot of early routes, you have to walk through grass to progress, but to backtrack, there's a bunch of slopes that let you avoid the grass. It's a neat way to show how far from home you've gone in a matter of seconds. So we return to the lab and get a few items. First is some Pokeballs to catch wild Pokemon to join my team, and second is a Pokedex, which keeps records on Pokemon I've captured. I've always had an affinity for Hoenn's Pokedex since it uses a scroll wheel for navigation. It's fun seeing it spin, but even better is holding one. I got this for my birthday the year after I got this game. The batteries are dead, but in it you would move automatically, turning the wheel to rotate your character, which was represented by a square, and every so often a Pokemon would appear that you can catch. And that's really all there is to it, but it was so fun scrolling the wheel. This thing's like ASMR for me. But back to the game, we also get a pair of running shoes from our mom, and with that, our adventure finally begins. At this point, I would start covering the routes, but I'm going to skip ahead to the next town first. Petalburg City is the first town with a gym, but it's actually the 5th gym in the game. I like this design choice because the knowledge that you need to return festers in your head, and it's also complemented by the gym leader being your character's father. So when you can finally challenge the gym, there's thematic stakes that don't exist with any other gym leader. Petalburg City is also where you get the tutorial on how to catch Pokemon, but the game makes you the mentor. This is Wally, some kid who lives in town that is moving across the region because of a health issue he has. He wants a companion to keep him company, so our dad lends him a Zigzagoon and some Pokeballs to get him one. And the Pokemon he finds is Ralts. Ralts is one of those Pokemon I fell in love with at first sight. It's a little ghost kid wearing a green helmet, and despite being a weird design combo, I needed to go through Route 103 to get one for myself. The one problem is that Ralts doesn't know any attacking moves when you catch it. On a signpost later down the road, the game tells you that leading with a Pokemon and switching them out gets that first Pokemon experience, but at that point my Torchic was kicking ass and was a much higher level than all the wild Pokemon around, so I fell victim to the trap of only raising my starter. It's always good to rotate between a few Pokemon, but I also think that trying to solo Sapphire with Torchic is super important for the game being my favorite of all time, because it fed into the rewarding feeling of victory every time I beat a difficult section. A lot of my narration will be from the perspective of a Torchic-only playthrough, but for the purposes of this review, I'll be using a full team of 6 Pokemon to see how balanced the game is, and as you may guess, Ralts will be the first Pokemon I catch. So now let's talk about the first 3 routes. They're all grassy areas, and the only noteworthy things about them are the Pokemon available. Zigzagoon, Poochyena, and Wurmple are all in Route 101. None of these 3 are worth keeping around long term, but I have a soft spot for them all. Zigzagoon is one of the most common Pokemon in the game, but it's best known to me for his ability Pickup, which can give you a bunch of free items. I actually never understood the purpose of hold items for a long time. I remember seeing the Zigzagoon colored box next to him that my other Pokemon didn't have, but I never thought it was important. Poochyena is garbage. Due to battle mechanics you wouldn't know about normally, Poochyena's stats don't coordinate with its type, making it appear weaker than it would be in future games. I'll elaborate more on this mechanic later, as it'll be important for one of the Pokemon I use this playthrough. Wurmple is cool only because it can evolve into either Silcoon or Cascoon, who then evolve into Beautifly and Dustox. It reminds me of Tamagotchi, but game-wise, these Pokemon don't have any particularly great stats beyond the first half of the game. Route 103 introduces Wingull, who I actually like, but this game has so many cool flying types that Wingull falls to the wayside. I'll give it credit though, because I usually catch one in most playthroughs in case of an emergency. And besides Ralts, Route 102 has quite a few new Pokemon. The first I want to talk about is Surskit, which segues into a greater topic of rare Pokemon. A lot of routes in this game feature a Pokemon with a 1 or 2% chance of appearing, and in most cases, Surskit is that Pokemon. I remember being stoked the first time I saw one because I wanted to use it, but like all Pokemon who aren't Torchic, it never held up in battle. It does get a sweet evolution in Masquerain, but I wish it kept its Bug Water type instead of becoming the ever so common Bug Flying combo. The other new Pokemon in this route are Lotad and Seedot. I introduced them together because they're exclusive from one another, so Seedot only appears on Ruby, while Lotad only appears in Sapphire. Of the two, I think Lotad is cooler, and I also had no idea what Kappas were, so I saw a blue duck thing with Lilypad and thought it was another awesome Pokemon. Game-wise, I think Lotad is a great addition for specific support roles I can get later on, so I usually keep one around, and in this playthrough I'll be using one for more than just a support. Route 102 is also the game's introduction to berries. Most routes have a few that you can pluck, and if you want to get more, you can plant them in the soil they were found in. This requires a functioning battery in your cartridge since it takes a day or 2 for the berries to grow, but the game gives away plenty, so without a battery you'll still have many opportunities to use them. Their main use is for a side mode I'll be covering in post-game, but outside of that, they're great items to have around for healing status effects. I also like that every berry plant is unique, and a lot of them are so vibrant and alien in design. In addition to getting excited at the prospect of exploring new routes, seeing what berries grew in them were just as tantalizing. And something I totally overlooked was that the berries are named after real plants, like the cherry and pecha berries are obviously inspired by cherries and peaches. But I never made the connection that the oranberry is based on oranges, and the chestoberry is based on chestnuts. Like I just realized those last month. And that takes us to Route 104. One thing that I think goes unnoticed is how the music in this game fits the tone and energy of the story. The first 2 towns and routes feature comforting music. You're still close to home, and although you just moved in, you're around your neighbors at most times. When you travel to Petalburg, you just pass the first route with trainers, so the game celebrates the achievement, but the music still reflects the peace of comfort since your dad's around, so you don't feel totally alone. But once you leave Petalburg and let go of that last attachment you have in this new country, that's when the adventure really begins, and the music accompanying this route reflects that with huge energy. I can imagine my trainer marching ahead, flailing a stick around like a band conductor to this song as he travels to where destiny chooses to guide him. And the route itself is pretty cool too. This is the first time you get to walk on a beach, and when you do, your character leaves footprints on the sand. And interestingly, the pathing is split, so you can avoid the trainers on the beach if you want by walking through the grass. Since I mentioned relying on my Torchic and the Pokemon Center so much, I would actually take the long way across the beach to heal up whenever Torchic's health got low, because I was so worried about my super fast chick not being able to run away from something like a Taillow, who is this route's new Pokemon. I see Taillow like Wingull, where it gets outshined by a lot of flying Pokemon you'll encounter later, but this route does feature a trainer who uses one that can tear through your team if you aren't prepared, so it does make a good first impression through that. Also on the route is this house with a dock that adds to the beach atmosphere, but trudging on we run into Petalburg Woods, which has this creepy music to make it intimidating. After all, forests have a lot of mystery to them, like what if a beast is wandering around, but the design is a linear path, so we can throw that out the hatch. There is a pre-evolution to a behemoth Pokemon living in the woods, and that is Slakoth. Slakoth is one of the most frustrating Pokemon to train because it needs to rest every other turn, but its final evolution, Slacking, has stats that rival the strongest legendary Pokemon in the game. I've never used one, but these things are well worth the investment. Shroomish can also be found here, and is one of my favorites. I think my sister caught one when she was playing the game, but I probably would have gravitated to it since it's a mushroom, and I was in the thick of my Mario Party craze at the time. If you don't plan on using a full team of 6, Shroomish can become a massive MVP late game if it can outspeed its opponents. Otherwise, it isn't a particularly notable grass type, this generation at least. Anyways, I use one this playthrough. Halfway through the woods, we encounter a mischievous man depending on if you're playing Sapphire or Ruby. This person is a grunt of the organization Team Aqua in Sapphire and Team Magma in Ruby. I got Sapphire, so it's a swashbuckling sea rover. Let me start by talking about the design. I had a blue and white striped shirt like the one Yoshi wears in Pirate Land that instantly became my favorite shirt, and I really wanted to share that for some reason. This is the reason. Yeah, I know the grunts wear a black and white striped shirt, but my brain was telling me to obsess over it. Also, pirates are cool. I don't think I need to justify that Team Aqua has drip. But the reason this grunt is out in the woods is to steal some papers from this man named Devin Researcher. We stop the grunt and the two run away. Following suit, we reach the end of the woods and re-enter Route 104, which has just as many cool sights in the north as it does the south. For starters, there's the Pretty Petal Flower Shop, where we can get the Whalmer Pail, which helps berries grow more berries. And outside the store is a guy who gives away a technical machine that can teach one Pokemon Bullet Seed. Technical machines, aka TMs, can be collected by talking to random trainers, found on the ground, earned from gym leaders, and bought in some cases. Some of them can teach your Pokemon a really strong move that it normally wouldn't, but a lot of them are useless. I'll be highlighting some of the good ones, but I'm not going to mention most of them. Bullet Seed in some cases can be a great TM. I mentioned that Shroomish can be a beast late game, and Bullet Seed plays a key role in that. But the attack gets worse later on because it's a weak move. I'll elaborate on this more once Shroomish evolves, and to tease you, it has to do with the reason why I think Poochyena is a garbage tier Pokemon. But back to the route. We got water, there's a lake you get to cross, and you can see your reflection in the water, which was so cool. Petalburg has this too, but I didn't notice it until I got this far. There's even a few puddles with the same effect, and just like the sand, walking on it leaves a trail, this time with ripples. It's so simple now, but this stuff blew my 6-year-old mind. And we're not even done with Route 104, because this is when the game introduces double battles. You send 2 Pokemon out, your opponents send 2 Pokemon out, and there's more opportunities for strategic thinking because of this format. It could have been a fun gimmick, but most of these battles lack any challenge, because the trainers you match never use full teams, or they get wasted on showing off Pokemon designed for the format that have god-awful stats. I'll be complimenting a lot of design choices in this game, but the implementation of double battles in the story needs to go back to the drawing board. Here it is, the city with stone roads. I was ecstatic to reach this point because Rustboro City has this atmosphere of grandeur. It's the first time we're walking outdoors and the ground isn't dirt or grass, so it makes this place feel significant compared to everywhere else we've been through. Plus there's streetlights, a fountain, this massive building that looks like a church, there's a school, apartments, and the first gym we can challenge. Gyms are the backbone to Pokemon, and a lot of my strongest memories of this game happen in them. There are more or less dungeons with a boss at the end, the gym leader, and they all focus on one specific type of Pokemon, this one being the rock type. I call gyms dungeons because there's usually a puzzle to solve to reach the leader, but the first gym takes a simple approach, giving you the choice to battle some trainers or walk around them. Torchic struggles against rock Pokemon, so I'd usually avoid these battles, but now that I tend to use Shroomish, there's no reason to skip the experience. And the gym leader Roxanne is what I would call a fair fight. She uses a Geodude and her ace is a Nose Pass. Back when I was solo with Torchic, the only way I stood a chance was by evolving Torchic into Combusken at level 16, which gives it the fighting type, neutralizing its rock weakness, plus it learns the attack Double Kick. And this right here is why I wanted to pick Torchic. Double Kick packs a wallop, and its animation looked way stronger than everything else I'd seen. But it's not powerful enough to strong-arm Roxanne. Her team of 3 is just enough to let Combusken solo her or get steamrolled, and her Nose Pass has incredible defenses, so it could tank a few kicks, throw some rocks, and heal up, making every turn count. It's usually a pretty close match. Too bad Shroomish makes this fight cake. But once we exit the gym, the Team Aqua Grande is seen running away from Devin Researcher toward Route 116, which hosts a variety of new Pokemon. For starters, there's another rare Pokemon, Skitty. I don't think Skitty's good. It surprisingly gets outshined by Zigzagoon in every category, except for cuteness, I guess. And it even gets outshined by another normal type in this route, Whismur. Whismur is such an odd Pokemon because it's themed around sound more than any element in the game. It also looks really weird, like what emotion is this? I don't know, I've never felt inclined to use one, but the next Pokemon has one of the coolest gimmicks ever. This is Nincada, and it evolves into 2 Pokemon, but not like how Wurmple evolves into either Beautifly or Dustox. When Nincada evolves, you legitimately get 2 Pokemon. Ninjask, its true evolution, which is the fastest non-legendary to this day, and if you have a Pokeball in your inventory and a free space in your team, you get Shedinja, who is a massive anomaly. For starters, its HP stat is 1, which means any attack can kill it. But to counter this, its ability is Wonder Guard, which means the only way to attack it is to use a super effective attack. This mon is immune to 12 types. If that isn't hype, I don't know what is. But returning to the route, there's a cave at the end, and outside is a man clamoring about his Pico getting abducted by who we can only assume is the Team Aqua grunt. So we enter Rustturf Tunnel, and this is what I would consider the first really cool location in the game. It made me excited to discover what else this world offers, since every location up to this point has been congenial, harmonious. Rustboro City may have set my expectations for this world, but Rustturf Tunnel shattered them in an instant. And what also made this cave so unique is that only Whismur live here. But within a few seconds of exploring, we find the Team Aqua grunt, since Rustturf Tunnel is actually a dead-end cave. So we fight him, save Pico, get Devon's goods, and escape. Pico's owner, Mr. Briny, owns the house at the pier on Route 104 and offers a lift in his boat if we're in the area as thanks. And Devon Researcher is so grateful for our continued assistance that he takes us to see his company's president. Mr. Stone gives us a Pokenav and asks us to deliver 2 other items around the country for him, which is a pretty reckless request, but we'll do it. The Pokenav is a marginally useless contraption in my opinion. It gives you a map, which the Pokedex essentially does, and you can see random tidbits about previous trainers you've faced. After collecting 5 badges, this page lets you see if any trainers want a rematch, but it's a feature I never check out. It also has a page for the post-game mode that uses berries, so for this point in the game, the Pokenav is just a menu option that makes you press down one more time when you want to save. And I'll just mention it now, but come back here once everything's been delivered, because Mr. Stone will reward you even further with the experience share. It's an item you can give to a Pokemon in your party, and it splits experience that the Pokemon you used in a battle would have earned. It makes it so you don't have to constantly lead with a Ralts and make your good Pokemon take unnecessary damage all the time. It's the most important item in the game, so make sure to get it as soon as you can. And with that, we're free to continue our adventure, but there's something we still need to grab in Rustboro: the Cut HM. This is found in the house next to the Pokemon Center and allows you to cut trees in the overworld after you've beaten Roxanne. HMs are a big flaw in older Pokemon games, since you have to waste an attack slot on a Pokemon in your party to use it. It's not uncommon for people to have a Pokemon dedicated to 3 or 4 HMs on their team, but for the purposes of this video, I'm using every HM on Pokemon that will be on my final team, except since my team isn't full yet, Zigzax will get to be my primary cutter for now. And maybe it was just a me problem, but every time I ran into a roadblock where I needed an HM, I would have absolutely no idea what to do. I only knew where Cut was because my sister got it when she played, but even if she didn't find Cut, I would have been well off, since every tree that can be cut is in a location that only hides an item or some berries. And our next destination is actually Mr. Briny's house, since every route we can explore is blocked off by other obstacles. I've already talked about really mundane things in this game, but I've probably spent more than half an hour of my life running around the table with Briny and Pico and enjoyed every moment of it. But let's head to Dewford Town. The music in Dewford Town is a calm symphony to reflect the quiet island residents, but halfway through it picks up this cheerful melody. It's a beautiful piece that goes to a rather forgettable location. Dewford Town doesn't have much to it besides its gym, but you can pick up the Old Rod, which introduces fishing as a means to catch Pokemon. There's 2 other rods to collect later on, but right now all you can catch are Magikarp, Tentacool, and Goldeen. And this is where the game starts to introduce Pokemon from the Kanto and Johto regions in the wild. Even now, I prefer this design choice because I like to use Pokemon native to whatever region I'm in, and I think that putting in only Hoenn Pokemon in the early routes helps with world building. It makes it easier to think of the region as a new, never explored location, since that's all you're exposed to. So yeah, I'm not going to spend too much time talking about older Pokemon in this video, but just to sound more insane, I think this game made a perfect selection of which Pokemon to include, and that is 100% bias spewing out of my mouth. But let's talk about the gym. It focuses on fighting types, but for whatever reason the gimmick is that the gym is dark and every trainer you beat lets you see more clearly as you navigate a pretty simple maze. It's not too bizarre since the HM you can use after beating the gym leader is Flash, which lets you get a similar circle of vision in caves, but earning that ability was one tough task. Brawly, Dewford Town's gym leader, was the first time in this game where I really got stuck because I couldn't win a battle. He leads with a Machop, then follows with a Makuhita. So as you know by now, I was only using Combusken the first time around, but I had no clue about the type chart. So when I fought Machop, I was using Double Kick since it was my strongest move. But actually, the best option for this fight was Peck, because flying type attacks excel against fighting types. The funny thing is, I would use Peck against Makuhita, and the only reason I thought it was super effective was because Makuhita looked like a balloon, so logically Peckin would pop him. But even with that accidental advantage, Combusken wasn't strong enough to tank both of Brawly's Pokemon, so I spent a lot of time traveling in the cave on the island to level up. Granite Cave features a lot of new Pokemon, and even includes a hard counter to Brawly if you're playing Sapphire. Sableye. Like Ralts, is a Pokemon I fell in love with the first time I saw it, but I could never catch one. I legitimately thought that the move Foresight prevented it from getting captured because I could never catch it if this attack was used. And while Shedinja is cool for having 12 immunities, Sableye has no weaknesses, making it defensively suitable in all matchups. And in the case of Brawly, Sableye is immune to fighting and normal type attacks, making it invincible against his Machop, while Makuhita can only use Knockoff, which is a very weak attack. Sableye's opposite, and exclusive to Ruby, is Mauville, a steel type, which means it gets bodied by Brawly. I've always found its design to be so bizarre, having a massive mouth jutting out of its head, and its typing only made it more perplexing. Another steel type is Aron, who has pretty good attack and defense, but it also has the rock type, making it extremely weak to fighting and ground type attacks. That's literally the only reason I never gravitated to it, since its final evolution is monstrous. The final new Pokemon is Makuhita, the balloon who is actually a punching bag. It's not a bad choice for a fighting type, I just happen to have Combusken, and soon I'll be getting another. And for returning Mons, you can find Geodude, Zubat, and Abra. Zubat defensively counters Brawly, and Abra does offensively, so while Brawly was a memorable challenge back in the day, there's so many options to beat him by this point that I can't even conceive how I struggle so much anymore. But we're not done with Granite Cave, because awaiting at the end is a man named Steven, who happens to be Mr. Stone's son, and one of the items we're delivering for him is a letter for Steven. It's such an odd location to make this exchange, but I figure it's the game trying to give you a reason to travel through the entire cave. And one more thing to note is that the HM for Flash can be obtained from the hiker at the cave's entrance. I think you're supposed to beat Brawly first, then go to the cave, but since I failed so horribly, I had to explore the cave in darkness. After delivering the letter, Briny offers to take us to Slateport City, which is interesting since you don't have to beat Brawly to unlock this, so if you really want to, you could skip him and return when your team is all hulked up. Slateport City is another iconic location in this game, and this time it's a mix of being a cool location, having a bombastically catchy song, and also containing a bunch of roadblocks of its own. But let's start with the beach. I loved running around here, going under the umbrellas, and getting soda pops from the seashore house. The whole place sells that beachy atmosphere, except the lifeguard battle takes place on a grassy battlefield. Are we ready for that conversation? And when you get into the city itself, there's a sweet lighthouse at the bottom right corner, a big market in the bottom left, and the first Pokemon contest hall. Well, technically the third. Contests are that side mode that uses berries I'll be talking about in post-game, but for now, make sure you talk to this girl to get a Pokeblock case, because it's going to be necessary to do well in this mode. The real highlight of Slateport City are these Team Aqua grunts blockading this building. I legitimately couldn't figure out what I was supposed to do with them, and I couldn't keep going north because there were more grunts lined up, preventing me from advancing. So instead of talking to random people in town, I let my sister play the game, and that fucking shit-ass figured out you need to talk to this specific guy in the shipyard to make Team Aqua disappear. From the town at least. This opens up the museum, which actually features a lot of exhibits if you want to learn about water. And can we talk about how there's no panic about this terrorist organization flooding into a museum? 50 Pokebucks is 50 Pokebucks, I guess. But at the top floor is Captain Stern, who was the other person we're meant to deliver an item to, and it just so happens that this is what Team Aqua is after. We battle a few grunts, then come face to face with their leader, Archie. Except he isn't looking for a fight. He calls his crew a bunch of simps, then they all disappear from Slateport. Odd, right? But hey, we can finally go north and explore Route 110, and we're gonna be spending a lot of time here. So first and foremost are the new Pokemon. This route introduces all of Hoenn's electric Pokemon and one of its 2 poison types. Plusle and Minun are this generation's Pikachu clones, who were designed with double petals in mind with their abilities Plus and Minus that give a special attack boost when paired together. Electrike is the other electric type, and it can be pretty effective late game. I personally like its evolution's color palette, since it's the same combination as Ring Pop's best flavor. Someone had to say it. And the poison type. Gulpin was love at first sight. If you couldn't tell, green is my favorite color, which plays into Ralts and Shroomish being some of my favorite Pokemon. So when I saw Gulpin being this adorable green blob with the lips and the feather, I was sold. But since every other Pokemon in the wild is severely underleveled compared to my Combusken, I never used it. When I finally learned how to balance my teams, Gulpin was an easy choice to include, and when it evolved into Swalot, I saw the stash and was super hyped. Swalot is my favorite Pokemon of all time, but it wasn't instant. There's a lot of Pokemon this generation that I love, but for whatever reason, Swalot gradually snuck up my rankings. There wasn't a key moment or anything like that to push it up as my favorite. It just is, and I don't refute it. Is that weird? Yeah, and then Oddish is in this route too if you want a worse poison type. Kinda fitting that my sister's favorite Pokemon is in the same route as mine. And just a few steps further, we pass the Trick House. One of my favorite things about Pokemon games are the puzzles inside gyms, and the Trick House is essentially a collection of scrapped gym layouts with a few requiring HM attacks to progress. Some of them even use elements from the gyms in the game, which is great because the gyms feature some awesome puzzle concepts that I would honestly pay to see a game full of these things. And I also like that the Trick House only unlocks new layouts after you collect badges, so it was pretty exciting to backtrack and see what the latest puzzle would be. Without spoiling future gym puzzles, I really liked the Trivia Room, which asked questions so specific I would probably research the subjects if it came down to it. And another favorite is the Slippery Floor puzzle, which is a series staple. Left of the Trick House is Route 103, which has a few trainers to battle, and as you may have guessed, it means we're very close to home. As you'll see with the map design, everything is very cyclical. A lot of routes are cut in half, where the only way past an obstacle is to run across the country. It may appear frustrating, but a lot of these wind up being nifty shortcuts you get to unlock once you loop around. This particular shortcut won't unlock until much later, but the timing of when it does is impeccable. But we mustn't worry about that now. As you might have noticed with Route 110, there's a giant road above it, and there's people up there riding bikes. I want to get up there so badly, but you need a bike to enter. That means we need to take the path below, which is a thin trail of scattered grass that winds around the water and is surrounded by a wall. It's super unusual, but let's keep running ahead. Remember when I said Slateport had roadblocks? Well, I wasn't just talking about Team Aqua. This battle with May is one of the most difficult in the game, especially if you only train your starter. I've even heard that this is the toughest battle in a speedrun. So since my starter was Torchic, May is going to have a Marshtomp. If I chose Trico, she'd have a Combusken, and if I chose Mudkip, she'd have a Grovyle. But no matter what, she'll have a Grass type, a Fire type, and a Water type. It's possible to solo this fight with a starter, but it's a rough time. I've seen Mudshot so many times the animation lives rent-free in my head. And I'm pretty sure the only reason I beat her the first time was because there's a 5% chance Mudshot will miss, and I must have gotten 2 misses. And this battle made me glad I picked Torchic first, because I tried playing with Trico, and this battle was so difficult I had to raise it to at least level 29 to learn Leaf Blade. I don't remember how high I had to raise Combusken's level to, but I know it wasn't 29. I spent so much time failing at this battle, I had dreams where I was guessing what the next city looked like. Because of the bike path and the lightning bolt I could see on the gym leader's shirt in the instruction manual, I assumed it would be some technically impressive super city. But once we beat May, she gives us an item finder and bikes away. Seeing her with the bike raised my hopes up. Getting that soon would be the only thing that can make up for all the losses. But let's talk about the item finder for a moment. There's a lot of invisible items lying around the world, and the item finder leads you toward them. And to complement this game's level design, Route 110 features a lot of gaps in the grass, with quite a few of them containing a hidden item. Is it worth running around each route to find these invisible treasures? No. But I do like the idea of items being hidden all around the map to discover if you're really dedicated. Not the super city I envisioned, but look! Bikes! And we get to choose between 2 styles. The Mach bike can move super fast, while the Acro bike can do wheelies and hop in place. Pretty easy choice, but both of these bikes are needed to enter certain areas around the world. Later on, we'll encounter steep slopes that a Mach bike can climb, and some areas will feature thin, uneven paths that an Acro bike can hop across. You're able to switch out your bike at the shop anytime you want, no questions asked, but it would have been great if you could get both later on, or if a new model came out post-game that would combine the strengths of both bikes into one. And while I think the Acro bike is much cooler and steers better, the Mach bike has way more secret paths to unlock, and its speed is nothing to sleep on. Just down the road is the gym, and in front of it is Wally with his uncle. Wally wants to travel the world and collect badges, but due to his condition, his uncle forbids it. So the little twerp challenges us to a battle, and all he's got is his underleveled Ralts, so obviously we're gonna put him in a body bag, and that's it. Wally learns he won't be able to pursue his dreams and goes back to Verdanturf. We'll check in on him later, but first we got the Mauville City Gym, which, as a Combusken owner, is the only gym I've never had an issue with. Electric types aren't particularly defensive, and Watson has a Magnemite and Magneton, which are both weak to fire and fighting. It's also worth noting that back in the day, my Combusken was all beefed up from maze fights, so easy is an understatement. The gym itself also features the first real puzzle element, where panels on the floor activate and deactivate electric barriers when stepped on. It's pretty simple, but it sure beats the last two gym puzzles by a long shot. And the TM you earn from Watson is Shockwave, which is a weak electric attack, but it never misses, even when a Pokemon uses moves like Double Team or Minimize. I highly recommend using it, since Double Team is one of the most frequent attacks you'll run into during the latter half of this game. Mauville City also has a game corner, but you can't play any games until you get a coin case, which turns into a side quest of its own. By talking to people, which by this point you should know my sister figured it out, we discover a woman in town who will trade her coin case for a piece of harbor mail, which is sold in Slateport's Pokemart. And this is a perfect opportunity to use the bike path. So considering I was only 6, one of the biggest thrills of my life was riding a bike around the neighborhood, and to low-key dox myself, there was a bridge nearby that went across the highway. I couldn't exactly appreciate architecture like that at my age, but riding above the cars and getting a better view of the area was pretty exciting. So seeing the bike path in this game made the world more relatable to me, since it's so similar to the bridge I'd go on. And if you're riding a mock bike, you can time how fast it takes to travel south, because this guy will track your speed and your crashes. It's pretty simple, but every playthrough I just have to get a sub 10. But we get the mail, trade it in for the coin case, and find out what gambling is. The game corner has 2 different games to play, slot machines and roulette. Both are pretty similar to their real life counterparts. In slots, you essentially pay 3 coins and consider timing the slots, or just button mash like me. It's easy to go broke on this, but I'd get a chain of 7s roughly once every 50 rounds, which is the only way to make a profit. Roulette is all I wanted to play though, but earning coins takes a lot longer. You can pick a Pokemon, color, or something specific, and let the universe decide your fate. I would just play this one and pick 1 square every time. I mean, it's not like you're using real money, so go big or go home. And if by some miracle you made bank, you can buy some powerful TMs here. Or these dolls I can't talk about yet. And one last thing I want to mention is the self-proclaimed hipster who hangs out at the Pokemon Center. He claims to know what's hip and happening. How does he know? Due to Mauville City's placement on the map, we can go north, east, and west, and including the bike path, this part of the game features a lot of trainers to grind against. I haven't talked much about my current team, but after battling everyone, my team is around level 20, which is really weird to me. I definitely remember evolving my Combusken at this point in my earliest playthroughs, which means it was at level 36. Ralts has evolved into Kirlia, and Lotad is now a Lombre. I always use Lombre for HMs, but it's been ages since I've last used it in a real playthrough, and not gonna lie, Lombre isn't good. It doesn't learn any strong water or grass attacks unless I teach it TMs and HMs I can't get until much later, and at that point its stats will be pretty terrible compared to other Pokemon I'll have. It needs a Water Stone to evolve and get good stats, but as far as I know, it can't be acquired until I get 7 badges, so for most of the game it's unfortunately dead weight. Kirlia was also sitting out in most battles because it's statistically worse than Lombre, but if you're patient enough to raise it to level 30, Kirlia turns into a powerhouse, but it'll be a while before I can demonstrate that strength. If we go east, it quickly turns into a dead end, but it does feature this trainer who can do something illegal. Yeah, this is fine. West of Mauville is Route 117, which is most notable for having the Pokemon Daycare. This facility is used for breeding Pokemon, or if you really want, you can put a Pokemon in there to level it up, since each step you take will give it 1 experience point. I never understood the ins and outs of the daycare, and I probably won't go in depth about it unless I make a video about competitive Pokemon, but that won't be for a long time. I'll also mention that I really want to walk around the grass in the daycare, because it has tall grass. Obviously, animals and daycare do not go together, but in my head, I thought there might be some way to get back there. But for wild Pokemon this route, there's Meryl, who isn't new, but if it's bred with a Sea Incense item, it produces Azurill, which is a new Pokemon. It's what's known as a baby Pokemon, which I'm kinda meh on, since they make catching them all more tedious. You can find Roselia, which is an okay grass type. Unlike Lombre, it actually learns grass type attacks, but its defenses aren't great. And then there's Volbeat and Illumise, another duo like Plusle and Minun, but they aren't designed with double battles in mind, so why do they exist? Illumise is actually pretty annoying in game, since it likes to heal, and Volbeat can boost its special attack a lot with Tail Glow, but I never feel threatened that it'll Volbeat my ass. So past this route is Verdanturf Town, which is where we can finally participate in Pokemon contests, but like I've been repeating like a broken record, that'll be in post-game. Verdanturf is also where Wally is staying, and this man insists that someday he'll defeat me, but I don't know about that! Verdanturf also contains the Rustboro Tunnel, which is still blocked off. Pretty soon we'll be able to open it up and have a shortcut to Rustboro City, but first let's check out the route above Mauville, Route 111. There's a house with a man standing at the door, which seems pretty important. He's Victor Winstraight. What is this, Ace Attorney? As his last name implies, you have to win 4 battles in a row at this house. One with him, his wife, their daughter, and his mother. I like this concept since gauntlets like this typically don't appear outside of special locations, and it helps make this area memorable. But I find the rocks outside their house to be more important. While the cut HM is totally optional, you have to find the HM for Rock Smash to progress, and just like every roadblock requiring me to talk to people, I let my sister figure it out, and who would have guessed, it's the only building in Mauville I haven't gone inside. It's pretty rare for every building in a town to have something to do or collect, and since most of the generic houses lack a collectible to receive, it makes sense that I'd overlook this one. And as long as Watson's been defeated, we can break the rocks here as well as those in Rustboro Tunnel. And when we do that, we receive the Strength HM that can be used after earning our 4th badge. Route 111 is another route that's divided into multiple sections, but before I can show how it's split, there's a TV reporter and cameraman hanging around. These are Gabby and Ty, and they'll interview us after beating them. This is one of the few occasions where you get to see this large menu of words open up, and depending on the situation, you can Frankenstein some sentences together, or choose whatever word you want to get broadcasted on national television. It's certainly an odd inclusion, but it has a ton of comedic potential. The bike path was a great tease for the bike shop, but Route 111 teases an entire biome that we had to wait to explore. It especially stands out at this point since every other route we visited has been grassy, so I want to know real badly how to stop this sandstorm so I could safely roam around and see what new Pokemon lived there. But since there's no obvious solution besides waiting, I just had to keep walking the path. And this takes us right into Route 112, which has a patch of grass that surprisingly only contains 2 Pokemon. The first is Machop, who is a solid Kanto fighting type, and the other is Numel, one of 2 new fire types besides the Torchic line. Numel is pretty solid. It has some great stats, learns some powerful attacks, and only has 2 weaknesses. Past this grass is where we start to climb a mountain, and the path splits. To the left is a cave, and to the right is a house being guarded by Team Aqua. Much like with Slateport City, the grunts won't leave until I speak to a certain character, and this person happens to be beyond the cave, Fiery Path. It's a tunnel more than anything, since the only noteworthy obstacle is a boulder we can push with the Strength HM, which, once again, can't be used until we beat the 4th gym leader. But behind here is the TM for Toxic, and a Firestone. For Pokemon, there's the other new fire type, Torkoal, who was essentially a slower but bulkier Numel. Either option is viable, but I lean toward Numel. And the rest of the Pokemon here are Koffing, Grimer, and Slugma. I'm sad to admit that Koffing and Grimer are statistically better than Gulpin, but they're not green, so boom. That's 1 point for the Gulps. Oh shit. Slugma's inclusion is cool because it was a post-game Pokemon in Johto, but it's much worse than Numel, so it goes another generation living in the shadows. And after leaving Fiery Path, we return to routes 112 and 111. We see the desert again, then run into this trainer who gives us the Secret Power TM, which opens up another side mode, but this one I'll talk about now. Around the region, you'll find specific trees, bushes, and holes in rocks that can be interacted with using Secret Power. And what this does is let you make a secret hideout, which is one of my favorite side modes of any Pokemon game, since it was exactly what I wanted in a video game at the time. As a 6-year-old, one of my favorite things to do was make a fort under a table, or put some chairs out and throw a blanket on top of them. And while the secret hideouts in this game lack the ability to customize your fort's design, each location features a different layout from one another, so you can pick one that's a big open room, or this one that opens with a corridor that splits into 2 rooms. There's a lot of options, but some hideouts have holes in the ground that have to be covered with a plank of wood you can only get by complete random and post-game, and I've never been able to get it. And what you do in the hideouts is decorate them. Along your adventure, you'll acquire plushies and pieces of furniture to place inside. Some cities even sell items just for hideouts. My personal favorites are these mats you can interact with, but I just want a place that looks cozy. Some items you can get are trophies in the game, like this tent was the final prize at the Trick House. And if you're wondering where I put my hideout, I usually do it in the south exit of Rustboro Tunnel. It's not too far from town, but it's also not too close either. And one last thing about Route 111 is that there's yet another house here, and this time it belongs to a woman who will heal your Pokemon. Consider it a mid-route Pokemon Center, and it also gives this part of the map some purpose, since the whole area around here screams pit stop. It's almost like the game is comforting the player before introducing what will forever be the most iconic route in any Pokemon game. This game had already impressed me countless times, but seeing Route 113 for the first time is something you don't forget. The world was snowing, yet the grass turned green when walked in. I had no idea what to make of it, since as far as I knew, the only white flakes that could fall from above was snow. But it's actually volcanic ash, since just south of this route is a volcano. And I've been slacking on the music talk, but Route 113 has another amazing song that complements the otherworldly environment. Like it's telling you, yeah, this is a real place. And at the end of the route is a house where you can get a soot sack, which lets you trade soot from grass you've walked in for flutes that cure specific status effects, increase wild encounters, or reduce wild encounters. There's also some furniture for secret bases that can be acquired. The items aren't all that great, but it sure as hell incentivized me to run around the grass and leave trails behind. And in the grass, you'll most frequently find Spinda, who all have unique patterns of spots on their faces. There's something like a 1 in 4 billion chance of getting 2 identical Spinda, which only adds to how incredibly unique this route is. And for older Pokemon, there's Sandshrew, who I've always liked but never used, and Skarmory, who just like Sableye was a Pokemon I loved the design of but could never catch. And it doesn't help that it's relatively rare to find, which only made this route even cooler. Leaving Route 113, we enter Fallarbor Town, which mixes farming land with a meteor crash site. No farmers though, it's a forgettable town. The Pokemon Contest Hall is its only highlight, and something about these buildings I skipped over is the picture showing the latest contest winner in the back corner. At default, this one shows Breloom, which is the first time I saw it, and of course I fell in love with it, but it took me a while to realize it was the evolved form of Shroomish. And speaking of which, my Shroomish evolved around this point, so now it's a grass fighting type. It may seem like a waste of a team slot since I now have 2 fighting types, but Breloom's attack stat is higher than what Combusken's will be when it becomes a Blaziken. The downside is that its special attack stat blows. In the first 3 generations of Pokemon, attacks use the attack stat or special attack stat based on its type. So fighting type attacks will all use the physical attack stat, but grass type attacks will all use the special attack stat. It's pretty annoying since it limits a lot of Pokemon and what attacks they should use. It's why I think Poochyena is garbage, because it gets a high physical attack stat, but dark type attacks use special attack. This difference can gut a lot of Pokemon just because of their stat distribution. Regardless though, Breloom's physical attack is so good that it's able to overcome this obstacle. Also in Fallarbor Town is the Move Reminder, who can teach a Pokemon a move it forgot in exchange for a heart scale, which is mostly found with the item finder. The only times this guy is important is for contests, maybe? Or if you button mashed learning a new attack and accidentally got rid of a move you wanted to keep, but you gotta hold the L at that point. If we keep walking west, we enter Route 114, which takes us back to good old Grass and Mountain. There's 3 new Pokemon, with 2 of them being version exclusives. In Ruby, you get Zangoose, who is one of the few normal types I might consider using in a playthrough. As the big Mario dork I was, seeing the red M on its chest obviously made me think of Mario's hat. And when I got Super Mario Sunshine, the only thing I could think of when I saw the graffiti was Zangoose. In Sapphire, we get Seviper, who's got great attack stats, but nothing else. I didn't learn it until 6 or so years later, but snakes and mongooses are natural rivals. So of course my immediate thought of that fact was Pokemon. And we got one more new Pokemon in Swablu, which is super cool. I love the aesthetic of a bird-cloud hybrid, and Swablu even becomes a dragon type when it evolves, making it more epic. This route is also where you can find Lombre in the wild, and while I'm using one on my team, I just want to point out that I normally catch one here during my smaller team runs, because Lombre learns some HMs Lotad can't, and since I don't plan on using Lombre in battle during those playthroughs, it's more efficient to catch one here than to raise a Lotad. And like Route 112, we get into the mountains for a bit before finding a cave. I said Rustboro Tunnel set my imagination wild with its interior, and Route 113's volcanic ash certainly left an impression on me. But already, we've got another location I had to stop and take in the moment I entered the cave. This is Meteor Falls, and it's broad daylight in here. I love the colors, I love these slopes, and the new Pokemon here make this place feel extra special. Another set of version exclusives, Solrock and Lunatone, are rocks shaped like the sun and moon. Sapphire gets Lunatone, and since there's craters everywhere and even a moonstone, I thought that maybe, just maybe, we were on the moon now. Or at least somewhere meant to replicate it. Hell, even the music sounds like we're somewhere exotic, somewhere tragedy and beauty live within a quantum entanglement. Clearly the craters are from meteors, hence Meteor Falls, and one of them becomes a key item in Team Aqua's plans. When we enter the cave, we see some grunts taking a meteor from this professor, Professor Cosmo. We also meet Team Magma for the first time and their leader, Maxie. His clan exists to stop Team Aqua, whose goal, by the way, is to enlarge the sea. And look, we can talk all about how asinine it is to want to enlarge the sea. But let's take a moment to consider this plan as a storytelling device. Is it a stupid idea to make the ocean, which likely takes up around 70% of this planet's surface, larger? Yes. But do I want to see how the hell mankind attempts to do it? Fuck yeah, I do! We need to return to the building in Route 112 that Team Aqua was guarding, but obviously I'm going to explore this sick-ass cave first. but unfortunately there isn't much to delve into. There's an exit in the southwest that takes us to Route 115, and there's not much to do here but battle trainers. But if we keep going south, we return to Rustboro City, which wowed me since finishing this loop made the world feel even more connected than before. Maybe it's because there's no turning back unlike the passage in Rustturf Tunnel, but this game felt massive and small at the same time, just after I jumped that ledge. And since we've closed that circuit, let's use Rustturf Tunnel to make our way back to Route 112. Team Aqua has abandoned the building, which is revealed to be a cable car terminal. Mount Chimney, a fitting battlefield for Team Aqua and Magma. Nothing says clashing ideologies quite like a pit of lava on the highest point of the country during a snowstorm. And I'm no brainiac, and obviously this is fiction, but I want to know what the writers were thinking when they decided that a meteor would have the power to make a volcano extinct, or even active for that matter. What the hell is in this rock, and why hasn't the government secured meteor falls to prevent some knucklehead from using the meteors for nefarious purposes? Also, why did the cable car lady let me travel to a location a terrorist organization just hijacked? Alright, there's your unbiased criticism serving. Mount Chimney is the first time we get to battle elites in Team Aqua. We got Admin Matt and Leader Archie. Matt isn't much different from any of the grunts. He gets a name and a unique sprite, so I'll celebrate to that, but Archie's got a team I expect from a boss. He uses Mightyena, Golbat, and Sharpedo. I've actually struggled on this fight, but not on a Torchic run. When I used Trico, Archie gave me so much health that I actually ended my playthrough. Every single time his Golbat made my team his bitch, and I still didn't know how super effective attacks worked, so I didn't have a counter. Just one more reason why I'm glad my sister stole my game and picked Torchic, because I'm not sure if I had the will to grind enough experience to win this fight. Let's be honest, I probably would have had the strength to push on just to see more Route 113s and Meteor Falls. And beating Archie ends his plans on Mount Chimney. Make sure to grab the meteor and bring it to Professor Cosmo for a reward, but now we've got free reign to explore the volcano and the route below it. I'm sure by now you know that I saw the lava and thought it was cool, and the snow was a nice callback to my favorite route, but there's not much to do here. You can return later on and a bunch of women are hanging around, but I found Jagged Path more interesting. There's a steep slope connecting Mount Chimney to Lava Ridge Town, and it's got one new Pokemon for us. Spoink. By this point, there's been a lot of wacky designs, but Pig without legs bouncing on its tail with a pearl on its head deserves some kind of award. You know I ate it up, but for a Psychic type, Spoink is too similar to the Ralts line, being weaker but relatively identical defensively. And besides Spoink, this place doesn't have much to talk about. I like the transition of grass losing soot, and we finally get to see an obstacle that requires the Acro Bike, but that's it here. The first thing about Lava Ridge that will stand out to you is probably the hot spring in the corner. In my gut, I was thinking it would be a repeat of the daycare, but there's actually a back door in the Pokemon Center that lets you take a dip with the ladies. Yeah, I thought it was cool walking in water with clothes on. You can also get buried in sand, with your clothes on too. And the woman here will give you an egg if there's an open slot in your party. Eggs are normally acquired by putting two Pokemon of opposite genders that can breed with each other in the daycare, and the offspring will match with the female. A lot of Pokemon games like to give an egg that hatches into a baby Pokemon, like Azurill, but there's one other baby this game, and that's Wynot, a pre-evolution to Wobbuffet. I don't think I'd ever recommend using it in-game, because it's way too gimmicky, requiring you to take hits before countering damage. And just for the lulz, let's put Wynot into the daycare, and we'll see what level it's grown to at the end of the video. Place your bets now. The real reason we're in Lava Ridge is to battle the gym, which uses fire types. The puzzle this time is another maze, but it's multi-layered, literally giving it more depth compared to other mazes. The gym uses the haze effect from Rustturf Tunnel to emulate steam, which is a nice touch, but it's time to face Flannery for our 4th badge. I'd say this battle is like Roxanne's, where the difficulty is based on if you have an answer for the leader's ace, which is a Torkoal. It has a really high physical defense stat, and if either of her Slugma use Light Screen, its special defense weakness gets covered too. It knows the move Overheat, which is especially powerful, but it's also Torkoal's biggest weakness, as the attack severely cuts down its special attack. But none of that matters since it gets attract, which immobilizes any male Pokemon it's used against. Apparently there's a 50-50 chance you don't attack if your Pokemon's been seduced, but the luck I've had has been 100% bullshit my entire life! There's a few counters to this, like surrounding yourself with female Pokemon. I know, that's too much to ask for. Otherwise, there's an herb shop in town where you can get a mental herb, or if you've been playing in the soot, you can get the red flute in Route 113. Or just power through like I've been doing. And when you beat Flannery, you get the TM for Overheat. Like I said, it's really strong, but I usually save it for the end game. Not sure why. I should trade it for Combusken Scratch, but this time I'm teaching it the Strength HM, so I'll have to test this out next time. When we exit the gym, May happens to be in town, and she gives us Go Goggles, which protects our eyes from the sandstorm in the desert. So you know what that means. This is Flygon. When I got this card, I wanted to use one so bad. The back says it lives in the desert and creates sandstorms, so I spent hours running around Route 111 trying to find one, but I came up empty-handed. Either it lives in a different desert, or there's a Pokemon that evolves into it I need to catch, but nothing here looks anything like a Flygon. But actually, there is. Trapinch, the orange ant thing, was what I was looking for all along. I was shocked to learn that, even though it's no different from the metamorphosis that Wurmple undergoes. I've used Flygon just about every time I've played this game since I learned how to get one. It was my favorite Pokemon on a visual level. Really not sure how Swalot got there now, but Flygon encapsulates everything I love about this game, where seeing it alone filled me with awe, enough so to just play for hours and hours to acquire it. And the card reinforced the symbiosis of the Pokemon in the world. Flygon creates sandstorms which made them appear more dangerous, and something as cool as Flygon was the one making it that way. Were the Lunatone and Meteor Falls controlling the meteors? Do Spinda create snow? Is Whismur the reason Rustboro Tunnel is green and misty? It's not exactly what I was thinking, but the possibility opened up. So anyways, I'm using Trapinch this playthrough, filling out my 6th slot. Oh yeah, and Gulpin evolved into Swalot a while ago. I've already mentioned it, but the first time I saw Swalot and that sweet stash, I couldn't help but smile. Is that why he's my favorite? I don't even know anymore, but it just made me feel a certain way. A couple other new Pokemon in the desert include Cacnea, which is a good grass type. It doesn't have the best move pool, but its attack stats are really high that weaker attacks work for it. And then there's Baltoy, who has the unique type combo of Ground Psychic. It has 6 weaknesses, but covers it up with its high defenses. Not my cup of tea, though. In the top right corner of the desert is a pair of fossils that we can only take one before the other sinks us to the sand. These are the Root and Claw fossils. Whichever one you pick can be brought to the Devon Corporation and revived. The Root fossil gives you Lileep, and the Claw fossil has Anorith. I love the designs for their evolutions. Lileep is more of a support Pokemon, while Anorith is offensive, but neither of them learn especially good attacks, which unfortunately makes me not want to use them ever. And let me mention the music here. It makes you feel like you're in a desert. Our next destination is back to Petalburg, where we can finally challenge our dad. Finally, our homecoming. This gym uses normal types, and instead of having a puzzle, you just go from room to room, and the trainer inside uses an item like X Attack or Dire Hit, which only confirmed to me that these items are useless, since they never made a difference in battle. It turns out that they could have made some of the gym leaders much easier, but I'd rather test new Pokemon and attacks before items. Some of them would probably be great for the gym leader, Norman. He leads with a Slacking, which as you may recall has stats on par with legendaries. One of the reasons I like having 2 fighting types is to make this battle easier, because it sure isn't a cakewalk. Slacking's main attack is Facade, which does a lot of damage because of that massive attack stat. Thankfully, it can't attack every turn because of its Truant ability, so during those opportunities you can heal up or get a free hit in. I don't recommend status attacks though, since Slacking has Encore, which can lock you into that attack, and if you status it, Facade gets even stronger. If you beat Slacking, next up is Vigoroth, which has more fair stats, but can attack every turn. And last is yet another Slacking, but I don't know if the game programmed this one to be easy or what, because it has a threatening moveset, including an attack that can heal half of its health, but it will almost always use Focus Punch, which misses if you attack at the same turn. By this point, the game has told you not to use status attacks because of Encore, so if you keep attacking it, it just fades without any hassle. Like, if it uses Facade even once, it wins, but it just doesn't. So we get our 5th badge and the TM for Facade. I always called it Facade because that's how it's fecking spelled. It's just as strong as Strength, but like I said, it doubles in power if you're statused, so it's definitely worth using. And Norman also says Wally's dad wants to see us. I hope you paid attention because this was another dumb roadblock I encountered, and this one was worse because we're in a backtracking position, so the item we need to progress could theoretically be anywhere. It took me a while to think that maybe I should check the town the gym was in, but I for some reason forgot that this was Wally's neighborhood. Wally's dad gives us the Surf HM, but not as a bribe or anything, and this lets us traverse water, so I'll be taking this opportunity to revisit the sea routes we crossed using Mr. Briny's boat. But first, let me mention the great game design of having lakes in Petalburg for us to try out right away, and having the river in Route 103 that takes us to Slateport and Mauville. West of Mauville is more land, but Slateport was more interesting because it goes straight into the ocean, but if we try surfing there, the current keeps us out. Starting in Route 104, I'll mention that there's no new Pokemon we'll run into while surfing, besides Pelipper, the evolution of Wingull. So get used to seeing these birds and Tentacle every 10 seconds. The main reason to check out these routes now is to battle the trainer swimming around, which surprisingly has a lot of people just chilling miles into the ocean. Dewford has a house with a trainer who gives you the Sludge Bomb TM at this point, which will teach Swalot. And if you go into the Grande Cave with a Mach Bike and a Pokemon with Rock Smash, you can find Nosepass in the wild. I don't think it's any good, but here's the opportunity to use one. On route to Slateport, we pass the abandoned ship, which is pretty cool to explore because it makes you wonder why it's here. And despite being labeled abandoned, it's way more crowded than your home. Make sure to pick up the Ice Beam TM here because it will be incredibly useful. Also, just this one trainer is coated inside a cave for some reason. Let's talk about shiny Pokemon. There's a 1 in 8,192 chance that a wild Pokemon will be shiny. I bet you won't see 1,000 encounters in a playthrough, so these are pretty rare. The first time I saw one was a Chinchou, which was like 5 years after I got the game, but I didn't realize it was shiny until I ran away because I was multitasking. And then the next time I saw a shiny in this game was 7 years or 2 playthroughs ago when I found a shiny Numble after I gave up on playing this game for a Let's Play on my old channel. This Wingull was willed into existence. I thought it would be awesome if I ran into a shiny for this video, and I thought it would be a Wingull of all things. Yes, I played the probability game, but actually my odds of seeing a shiny were low, since the last Pokemon game I played, I found a full odds shiny toward the end of that playthrough. Just flexing. And there's one more place to discover with Surf. If we swim at Route 115, there's a patch of grass we can access that has Jigglypuff. Not worth it, and they should have picked Clefairy. It would have made more sense thematically, since it's believed to come from the moon. But we're not done with side content, because hanging out in Mauville City is Watson, who asked us to turn off the generator underground, which can only be accessed by surfing to a cave on Route 110. Here you can find Magnemite, Voltorb, and their evolutions. You can also get a Thunderstone, and after the generator is shut off, Watson will reward us with a Thunderbolt TM, which you should absolutely use. And with that out of the way, how about we cross the river east of Mauville? Alright, I lied. This fisherman on the coast here gives us a good rod, so real quick I'll run down the new Pokemon we can find. Right here on Route 118 we can find Carvanha, which pairs high attacks and speed with low defenses, making it a glass cannon. South of Mauville on Route 110 is Wailmer, which is bulky and has pretty good attack stats to boot. West of Mauville on Route 117 is Corphish, which competes with Carvanha as a water dark type, but trades speed for physical defense. And north of Mauville on Route 111 is Barboach, which is bulky, but it's the weakest of the four. I personally like to use Barboach the most, since it's a water ground type, which only has a weakness to grass, and it learns good attacks leveling up, which I can't exactly say about the other three, but statistically I'd say Wailmer is the best option. Water and dark type moves use the special attack stat, so all but Barboach are relatively equal in strength through that metric, and since Wailmer has more health, it easily makes the most sense to pick it as far as water types are concerned. So we forded the river and once again run into Gabby and Ty. Their Pokemon have leveled up as you can see, and there's a reason why I'm highlighting this, but I'll talk about it the next time we run into them. And a few paces beyond them is Steven, the guy we gave the letter to back in Grande Cave. Instead of giving us a favor or an item, he asks for our battle philosophy, then dips before we can speak. I always wondered why he was hanging out here when there's nothing to do, but I interpreted his appearance as a welcome to the right side of the map, and I'd even say that this is where the game spikes up in difficulty. Trainers are a bit more annoying to deal with, and all three gyms we have left are pretty challenging. In the grass we can find Linoon, Zigzagoon's evolution, and Manectric, Electrike's evolution. These two added to my difficulty increase assessment since evolved Pokemon instantly means stronger Pokemon. It made me more cautious about running around the grass because it's possible another behemoth could be lurking around. But here in Route 118, the only Pokemon hiding is Kecleon, who was the first Pokemon since Surskit to have a 1% chance of appearing during wild encounters. Kecleon is notable since a trainer uses one in the Fire Gym, even though it's a normal type, but its type is always changing based on the last attack it was hit by. I really like this design, and due to its rarity, I never found one in the grass here until years later. There's a split in the path, but if we keep heading right, some slopes keep us from moving ahead. There is a house here though, which has a guy inside who will give you 2 berries every day, and there's a lot of soil to plant berries too. In hindsight, this area isn't as important as I thought it was, since there's quite a few trainers who can give you berries every day, but I ignored most NPCs, so this was the only guy I knew about for a long time, which made him the most special. By the way, you can only get these berries once if your game's battery's dead. I love Route 119. It introduces tall grass that is too thick for us to bike through. It's raining, and it has this. Tropius molded how I perceived this route. Like Lunatone's appearance making me think Meteor Falls was on the moon, Tropius made me think we were in some prehistoric jungle. Visually, I love its design, since it's a dinosaur and I just learned about them in kindergarten, but its typing also astounded me. It's a grass flying type. I always thought it rotated the leaves on its back like a propeller, and it's got bananas on its throat. Hell yeah! Statistically, Tropius is kinda bulky, but it doesn't excel in anywhere particular, but the only reason you would be using Tropius anyways is because it's a dinosaur. This route also features the most difficult wild Pokemon to find, Feebas. Instead of just having a 1% encounter rate in the water or while fishing, which is still pretty awful to think about, Feebas only appears in 6 of the 400 some water tiles on the route. This playthrough is the only time I've actively tried to find one, but I gave up after an hour. And the gimmicks don't end there because it evolves by feeding it blue Pokeblocks that you can make at the contest halls, but even that has secret mechanics to worry about, which I'll mention once I talk about contests. I said the game gets harder at this point, and a lot of my perspective on that is because the gaps in between towns are much larger now than in the first half. So if some of your Pokemon faint or get a status effect put on them and you didn't buy items to heal them, then you have to run all the way back to Mauville City. I used to dread Route 119 because I'd have to backtrack at least 3 times since I was conservative with my money and berries. But if you keep pushing on, you'll walk past the Weather Institute, which is under siege by Team Aqua. The last thing I wanted to do on this route was deal with these guys, but something I didn't know for a long time is that this bed at the entrance can be used to heal up. I actually figured out that putting Pokemon in and out of the PC here would do the same thing sooner, but the bed is quicker. You'll also notice that my Kirlia evolved into Gardevoir. I hyped it up as a powerhouse, and that's because of its massive special attack stat. It'll already know Psychic at this point, but if you teach it Thunderbolt, this thing is unstoppable. Team Aqua is after research the Institute is conducting, which is pretty vague, especially since their leader can't go 5 seconds without telling people he just met that he wants to flood the world. Anyways, we beat Admin Shelly in a battle and save the day. If you have an open slot in your party, this guy will give you a cast form, which has an ability that changes its appearance and type depending on the weather. When we cross the bridge, we can travel down the river and obtain a Leaf Stone, but there's something more important. Remember how I said I didn't know you could heal your Pokemon at the bed or PC?
Fuck this game! Are you fucking kidding me? What the fuck is wrong with this shit?
Thank God this fight is easier than the last one, because having to travel all the way back here hundreds of times would have just killed my enjoyment. In my starter-only playthroughs, my Blaziken was probably 10 levels above her team, so it was strong enough to solo everything, but it sure sucked the first time when my health was low from Team Aqua. When we win, May gives us the Fly HM, and this will let us travel to any town where we visited the Pokemon Center, which means long routes like this one won't be as big of an issue since I can fast travel to the last town I was at instead of risking wild Pokemon knocking out the fodder in my party. But before we can fly, we need to get the 6th gym badge over in Fortree City. I mentioned at the beginning of the video that seeing new locations was a reward for going through difficult sections, and Fortree City being the follow-up to Route 119 is the best example of this. As a kid, I wanted nothing more than a treehouse to sit and play Game Boy in. My family had one of these playgrounds in our backyard, but all the treehouses I'd seen in cartoons made me want a fort built on top of some branches. At my grandma's house, she had a few trees where the branches were low and perfect for swinging and climbing on. I loved playing in the trees, and seeing the city of treehouses connected together with bridges made me love this game more than I thought was possible. And the music shares that sentiment, sounding like a tune you'd listen to when you want to feel at home. In the center of the town is the gym, but it's blocked off by an invisible force, so the only logical thing to do is keep going east. And once again we run to Steven, who shows us a device called the Devon Scope that lets us see invisible things. I like that this happens on a bridge, and in the shadows we can see a silhouette of something. It turns out to be a Kecleon, and since it's rare to find one in the wild, this is the best opportunity to catch it. So Steven lets us keep the scope, which means we can see that what's blocking the gym is another Kecleon, and this gym right here is my favorite. It's got the best puzzle, and the leader is just the right difficulty. To navigate the gym, you have to solve these sections with rotating doors, where the solutions typically require you to reset the door you just passed so it can be used again. It sounds repetitive, but I can never get sick of this. And the gym leader, Winona. The first time I saw her, I thought she was a Viking woman. I mean, she's got the helmet, the horns, the braided hair, and the wacky clothes. My logic was flawless. And her team is perfect, and a Blaziken run while being weak against flying types, the level disparity you should have by this point makes it possible to solo her team. And the Pokemon she uses are so varied that if you don't have an electric type attack, you'll have to fight for this victory, which is why I recommend picking up Ice Beam and Thunderbolt once you get Surf. Anyways, Gardevoir smoked her so hard I couldn't believe it. And with that, we can return to Route 120, which features Gabby and Ty once again. After this battle, they'll return to Route 111, where the cycle repeats. Their Pokemon reach level 39 eventually, and I often exploit these guys for experience and money. When I play with smaller teams, I wind up skipping a lot of trainers, so once I get underleveled, I usually grind against these two. But one thing I've learned from this playthrough is that the game is actually balanced, where you don't have to grind if you face every trainer you can find. I was expecting this to be the game's biggest flaw since I'm so used to skipping a lot of trainers, but it looks like this game was perfect from the beginning. Route 120 is a spectacle in how it coordinates with Route 119. That route was an uphill climb with showers pouring as a seemingly endless onslaught of trainers literally rain hell on you. Its music is what I would call intense outdoors. Route 120 is the peace after the storm. The rain ends at the tail of this route and puddles are scattered around. Reflected within them, as well as the lakes you cross, are clouds, darting to the west where they will soon cry onto other travelers like we had experienced. The music celebrates the clearing skies. Ironically though, this route's new Pokemon is Absol, which is known for appearing before catastrophes. It's a dark type with an amazing attack stat, but it doesn't learn many moves that can utilize that stat, making Absol mostly underwhelming. And now we enter Route 121, which stood out to me right away with its ghost types, Duskull and Shuppet. Duskull is best known for its defenses, and it carries a lot of good support moves, making it a good late addition to the team. Shuppet, on the other hand, is a strong attacker, but it's another Pokemon with weak defenses. You can still get some mileage with it though, since Ghost has a pretty good niche for the remainder of the game. And a third into the route, we sneak up on Team Aqua again, who has plans on a nearby mountain. The path keeps going right, but there's a lake next to us, which is where we need to go first. Because of this design, I didn't know where to go, and I'll elaborate on that more when we finally travel east. I did eventually figure out I needed to go south, but it was because I wanted to explore the routes here since I didn't think it was the correct path. So when I discovered this giant rock in the water had an entrance, I of course got excited. This game has an amazing track record with caves, so literally anything could be beyond this one. It's a cemetery. In my youth, I didn't grasp the concept of death. I had a grandpa who passed away before I was born, and often my grandma would take us grandkids to the cemetery. But I couldn't comprehend the idea that someone you love can stop existing, so Mount Pyre to me was just a mountain of graves. I didn't understand that graves mark life, so this entire location was a ghost tower more than anything. If you keep climbing the floors, the Shadow Ball TM awaits at the top. Make sure to grab it, but one staircase on the first floor takes you outdoors. Some songs are instant greats, and Mount Pyre Summit is one of those cases. I think the tone is meant to unnerve you as you walk over thousands of lives, but damn it, I'm energized as fuck listening to this. After all, this is my conquest. And there's new Pokemon up here. First is Meditite, who you've probably seen a dozen times by this point, since every Battle Girl trainer uses one. Meditite's stats may appear average, but its pure power ability doubles its attack stat. Vulpix also lives up here, and if you wanted a fire type, this is your last chance. I love Vulpix, but Numel has a better move pool. If we keep climbing up, some fog appears, capping off that mysterious mountain feel, and in the grass here we can find Chimney, who has a 2% chance of appearing. Of all the rare Pokemon, this is the one that's taken me the longest to discover, and the wait wasn't worth it, since Chimney is just okay statistically, but gets completely overshadowed by Gardevoir as a Psychic type. Team Aqua is up here along with Archie, who we see stealing an item called the Red Orb, and then he announces that he's going to Slateport City. After he leaves, this old couple gives us a blue orb that they claim shouldn't be separated from the one Archie stole, which is pretty reckless. Maybe they saw the Hadden instinct kicked in, and if you want to know what the orbs do, that's funny. But back to his Slateport comment. The first time I got to this part of the game, I must have been skipping through the text because I totally missed the part where I need to follow him to Slateport City. I figured it out on complete accident, but the funny thing is that this sequence of events is the part I forget most. In Slateport, we see Archie steal a submarine that used the Devon goods we delivered to Captain Stern long ago, and then he just disappears. Since half this region is water, he could be anywhere, and that frustrated me, but let's get back to the routes. South of Mount Pyre is Route 123, which has no new Pokemon. This is the most forgettable route since it's out of the way, and the only worthwhile reward here is the Giga Drain TM, which is one of the strongest grass-type attacks in the game. And other than that, this route sucks because it's a downhill trek over slopes, so you can't backtrack, which means you'll have to return one or two more times to collect every item and fight every trainer. Also, Trapinch has evolved into Vibrava, which means I can teach it Fly, but its stats are still booty, so I still won't be using it in battles. Going back to Route 121, we pass the Safari Zone, which hosts a variety of Pokemon from Kanto and Johto. I never stop here anymore, and a lot of the Pokemon you can find aren't used by any trainers in the game, so I constantly forget what you can find. Like, did you know Rhyhorn is in this game? I sure as hell didn't. There's Pikachu, Psyduck, Doduo, Natu, Girafarig, and Wobbuffet, and some areas can only be accessed with the bikes, so the Mach Bike gets you Dodrio, Rhyhorn, and Pinsir, and the Acro Bike has Xatu, Phanpy, and Heracross. In retrospect, I like how the game handles its inclusion of older Pokemon. While a lot of Kanto and Johto Pokemon appear before this point, they're not oversaturated. Every location features more Hoenn Pokemon, so when the Safari Zone shows up and it's all older Pokemon, it stands out as a location instead of being any other route. What also makes this game's Safari Zone notable is that it implements Pokeblocks as bait. All Pokemon have a nature which affects the growth of certain stats, as well as giving them a preference for flavors of Pokeblocks. If you're looking for a certain nature, using Pokeblocks makes it easier to do so, and if this wasn't limited to the Safari Zone, it would have been a cool method to ease players into optimizing their Pokemon's potential. If we keep going down Route 121, the fences get out of hand. My guess is that Game Freak ran out of ideas, and the guy at the office who really likes fences made a suggestion. Legit, why do so many Pokemon games have one route that's a labyrinth of fences? But this time it sets a tone because fences like this are more common in fancier, richer areas. So based on that description, what do you expect the next city to look like? For a game with a lot of unique towns, Lilycove is surprisingly my favorite. It's the right design at the right time, since this is our last destination before taking to the seas. The music is soothing, as if to say goodbye to terra firma. In a way, it hypes up the mysterious ocean. Anything could happen out there with how massive it is. I also love that the tide is low as we visit, allowing us to walk around the shore. The peninsula at the south end with a sculpture on it makes the layout more intricate yet balanced. There's a lot of big buildings like the Master Rank Contest Hall, which has 3 arenas in it. The Pokemart is a multi-story mall, and there's even an art museum here. There's a side quest where you can make art of your Pokemon to be displayed here, but it requires getting a high score in contests, and spoiler alert on that, but I couldn't get a painting. There's also a battle against May here, and unfortunately it's the last one, and she doesn't even evolve her starter. Team Aqua's here too. A couple of grunts are chilling about, which misled me when I was supposed to go to Mount Pyre, and they've trained Wailmer to block the ocean, but if we keep surfing up, we'll find a cave. This is another spot I thought was a secret area, but it's actually where we need to go. It's Team Aqua's base, which is a linear romp from room to room using teleporters. There is one split in the path, which leads to a memory puzzle with a Master Ball waiting at the end. This Pokeball lets us catch any Pokemon without fail. The problem is that something this powerful will often go unused, since there's the unknown possibility that something stronger than the strongest Pokemon exists, so it's best to keep the Master Ball around for that false opportunity. When we reach the end of the base, we see a submarine-shaped shadow in the water, but blocking our way is Admin Matt, and when we beat him, the submarine makes an escape. Here is part 1 of the biggest roadblock I faced in Pokemon Sapphire. Every obstacle I got stuck on was something I could see but didn't know how to overcome. But for plot-related purposes, I had to find this submarine, and unlike every other obstacle bar a Kecleon, you won't be able to see where you need to go. It's both a blessing and a curse to suddenly have to scour the entire region for clues on where to go. The best guess is somewhere in the ocean, but we had to climb a volcano at one point, so I wasn't eliminating any location from being their hiding spot. But for now, all we can do is continue collecting gym badges, and our next destination is Mossdeep City. Looking at the map, it was really intimidating seeing so many cities leagues from Lilycove. I'm sure many pioneers would pick a direction and go as far as they could, and that's what I did. I kept going right until I couldn't anymore, although I was probably bobbing and weaving around every trainer to preserve my Blaziken's health. And also worth noting is that my Combusken in this playthrough has finally evolved, giving it some long-needed stat boosts. But here in the ocean, the most exciting thing to see was a shoreline. An island with trees unlike anything I've seen. And the island keeps going right. It connects to a large island, to Mossdeep. This city is like Lilycove, where it's another case of right design at the right time. And to summarize this game, that's its motto. Every location seamlessly works off those before it in a way that builds up and up to something greater. There are peaks along the way, but the game takes advantage of the slower periods as a means to build up the next thing it wants to show off. Mossdeep City being an island makes it immediately feel foreign, and its size feeds into that as a way to instill that mindset. The 7th gym is here, but what's more interesting is that there's a whole space center to the east. I love the concept of space, but besides getting the Sunstone here, nothing in this building really screams rocket ships are made here, so I never associated this city with them. One other building I want to point out is this house with a door on the back wall. It's the only normal house in the entire game to have something like this, but it's locked, which is something I've always wondered about. Thankfully, I got the key. The Game Boy Advance e-reader was an accessory for the system that let you scan cards with these dot codes on them to unlock bonus content for games, or in some cases, they had a whole game on them. Pokemon probably got the most mileage off the e-reader since they put codes on their trading cards around this time, but Sapphire and Ruby received a bunch too. And while I had the cards, I didn't know how to use them. I've actually had these since I got the game, and this will be my first time using them ever. What I need to do is go to Petalburg City and talk to the trainer by the PC who has to see my profile. It opens up the word log Gabby and Ty use, but I need to tell him mystery event is exciting. Then I can use the e-reader. Why they made it this complicated, I don't know. And it's worse, because the instruction card promotes the Pokemon website instead of telling you what to do. This was 2003. You know how many people bought these cards but didn't have a computer back then? Whack. The cards actually did come with an instruction pamphlet on how to unlock the mystery event menu option. For whatever reason, they were separated from my cards, but there are instructions. Anyways, after telling the guy mystery events are exciting, a new menu will appear when you boot up the game, which allows you to connect to an e-reader. Whatever card I swipe, that trainer will appear in this man's basement. So if you're a child, watch out. I'll be honest, these cards aren't worth it. The battles are identical to something in post-game, but these don't reward you in any way. And you get the advantage of knowing what your opponent's team is, making the battles lopsided. And just to include this in the video, some cards have these symbols colored in, and what they mean is that trainers with the blue symbol will be mixed into the post-game thing I mentioned. Yellow symbols mean the trainer will use a Pokemon not in the Hoenn Pokedex, and the red symbol means all 3 Pokemon are level 100. The levels of the Pokemon on these cards vary, but most stick around 50. One more thing about the e-reader is that there are special berries you can only obtain from these cards, but you can only carry one of these types of berries at a time. They produce Pokeblocks better than any other berry, which gives contests a small pay-to-win variable. So back to the game, Mossdeep City's gym uses Psychic-type Pokemon, and the puzzle features conveyor belts that lead to buttons that alter the path they'll follow. It's one of the longer gyms to go through, but the solution is pretty simple. And once every button is pressed, we can find the gym leaders. That's right, gym leaders. Tate and Lisa. Considering this game introduced double battles, it makes sense there would be a gym that features them. They only use a Lunatone and Solrock, but their levels are bumped up to 42, which is a massive leap from every other trainer before this point. This gives their Pokemon a huge stat advantage, which makes this battle surprisingly difficult. I said I usually have to grind my Pokemon's levels up when I play this game, and this battle is the reason for that. And I was prepared to do that again, but Gardevoir is out here catching bodies. And after beating this gym, we can use the HM for Dive, and here is part 2 of the biggest roadblock I faced in Pokemon Sapphire. Where the fuck is Dive? At this point I was done asking my sister for help finding HMs, and it couldn't have come at a worse time because, spoiler alert on the Team Aqua thing, but we need Dive pronto. I assumed it was located at one of the other towns in the ocean, but upon further inspection, one is on top of a mountain that has no obvious entrance, and another is beyond a waterfall I can't pass. The last town of the ocean, while not the correct place, is another amazing location. I thought I'd seen it all, but apparently I haven't, because a town floating on the ocean using 2x4s blew me away. This is Pacifilage Town, and there's nothing to do, but I'd hang out here for free. One hut is worth checking out because a man inside will mention if he sees a Mirage Island, which under normal conditions has a 1 in 65,536 chance of happening. A tiny bit less likely than finding a shiny, and you can find Wild Wynot there, and I've never been more thrilled to have bad luck. But none of this mindless perusing is helping me find Dive. It was so frustrating not knowing where to go, and I did the unthinkable. I restarted the game. I think it says a lot about this game's design and impact that I could give up on my first playthrough, and it still is my favorite video game ever. Of course, I picked Torchic again, and soloed as much as I could with it, and what this did was strengthen my appreciation for the challenges and rewards. I knew what to expect, but I got to experience everything again. And when I did find Dive, I wasn't frustrated by how simple it was. Instead, I celebrated the ability to see more from this amazing game. I grew up playing games that couldn't save or I'd reset if they got too challenging, so I'm used to seeing the same locations and levels over and over again without getting sick. And if I got to this point and couldn't find Dive again, I'd probably do the same thing I have with Tony Hawk and Yoshi's Story and play to that point another time. Probably even a dozen more times. But the HM is in Mossdeep, and it just so happens that our good friend Steven lives here. He gives us Dive as a reward for breaking and entering, but before getting into part 3 of the biggest roadblock I faced in Pokemon Sapphire, there's a guy outside Steven's house who will give us the King's Rock item. I said Breloom can go ham in the late game, and this item helps it do that. The King's Rock gives its holder the chance to flinch its target if you attack first, and with moves like Headbutt, which can already flinch, and Bullet Seed, which hits multiple times getting multiple opportunities to flinch, Breloom can blitz through a lot of battles if it has the speed to go first. So part 3, how do you use Dive? I thought that being above water meant I could dive, but apparently not. And I don't even know what happens when I dive. Does my character pick an item off the ground or what? I legitimately had no clue, because every time I used the attack, it wouldn't let me. Well, it turns out I had to use it over the dark water, which I never thought was special. But boy, are they. Fuck, this was an amazing experience for the first time, and I think having to replay the game made it much more rewarding. I happened to do it where there was seaweed, so when I moved around and encountered a wild Pokemon, I got amped because it felt so unreal. It's the same thing I've been doing every route, but the circumstances made this occasion special. There's 3 Pokemon to find underwater. Clamperl, for starters, looks cool, especially since I had no idea what to make of it. It looks nothing like the clams from SpongeBob, and it has a gimmicky evolution, but I'll explain it in a couple minutes. Relicanth has a sweet design too, and it isn't bad statistically, but considering how late into the game we are, you'll probably have a water type on your team already, making it irrelevant. Last is Chinchou, one of my favorite Pokemon from Johto. I flip-flopped on all-time favorites a lot, but Chinchou's evolution, Lantern, sat at number 1 for a short while before I knew about Swalot or Flygon. I just love the concept of anglerfish. And before we get deep into some plot, let's talk about the ocean routes first. I'll be grouping them together since a lot of them are similar, but let me mention one last thing to collect in Mossdeep, which is the Super Rod. It makes a few more Pokemon accessible, like at Lilycove City's coast, we can use it to catch Staryu. Route 124 has a lot of random areas to dive in, leading to colored shards, and these can be traded for elemental stones to a treasure hunter that lives on an island near Mossdeep. I pointed out when you can get every stone, but the only one I've left out is the water stone, which we need to evolve Lombre, and that's because this is the earliest we can get that item. So finally we got a Ludicolo, which means I can now get away with saying "let's dance" and refer to fighting. North of Mossdeep is Route 125, which contains Shoal Cave. It's a more traditional cave, but its appearance changes depending on what time you come in, because the tide can get high enough to fill this place up. If you show up at high tide and low tide, you can collect salt and shells that this guy can use to make a shell bell, which heals your Pokemon based on how much damage it does. It's cool until you have to watch it activate every turn, which is the sloggiest thing in the game. Shoal Cave also features 2 new Pokemon. Spheal, the first ice type in the game, and it's really good if you're willing to reserve a late slot in your team for it. There's also Snorunt, who can only be found in the cave's depths during low tide. It's the only other ice type. Pick Spheal, he's really feeling it. The next routes I'll talk about are 126, 127, and 128, which are the most important places in the sea, although I'm not going to get into why until later. In the meantime, I'll point out how big these routes are, since 126 and 127 have entrances to each other, as well as entrances from the north, making these areas easy to get lost in. One of the biggest complaints this game gets is that there's too much space to travel around during the water routes, and I'll agree to that. It's easy to get lost even though this is the only point where the ocean isn't a straight line, but there's enough landmarks to find your way, like Mossdeep being in the northeast and its ring-shaped island being in the southeast. As long as you consider Route 126 a room with a door in the center of its walls, you should be fine. Route 127 also has 1 new Pokemon, Corsola. Lore-wise, it should be below Pacifilage Town, but they live here for some reason. The next grouping of routes is 129, 130, and 131. These are literally a straight line from the Ring Island to Pacifilage. Not much to say. And to the left of Pacifilage are routes 132, 133, and 134, which form this maze of currents you need to use multiple times to battle every trainer and collect every item. But unlike Route 123, the branching paths work because the currents are more engaging and the entrance is close to a fly point, so it isn't a hassle to travel here. Besides, you know I was going to mention how much I like the currents. They turn the route into a puzzle, making each step you take turn into a game of memory and mystery. It was also mind-warping seeing Slateport at the end of this area. I never tried surfing here way before this point, so I never knew about the currents until I got to Pacifilage. These routes also feature Horsey, who I also forgot is in this game. Maybe they shouldn't have put it in the routes that are 96% moving obstacles. And since we're here, I also want to return to Route 108, since the abandoned ship has a few items we can now get with Dive. First is the Water Stone. They really screwed Lombre putting it here. And there's also a memory puzzle where you pick up items off the ground to open doors with harder versions of the same puzzle. And at the end of it all is a scanner that can be traded to Captain Stern for either a deep sea tooth or a deep sea scale. Some Pokemon evolve when they're traded to another game, but Pokemon like Clamperl need to hold an item while they're traded to do so, and in this case, Clamperl has 2 evolutions. With a Deep Sea Tooth, it becomes Huntail, and with a Deep Sea Scale, it becomes Gorobus. The difference between the two is that Gorobus has good special attack, while Huntail got a raw deal. So let's get deep into the story. Surrounding the Ring Island is water we can dive in, and this reveals a cave with a missing submarine inside. It felt so good seeing this thing because it was on my mind for a long time, and it meant I could finally progress. And while this cave doesn't feature any cool aesthetics to reflect us being underwater, it does feature a few puzzles requiring strength. which can often be tedious, but this game does them right. The first is this room with 2 entrances and 2 exits. It's funny thinking how cliche it is when cartoon characters are lost in a cave with branching paths, but when the game does it, I praise how the design makes you second guess every boulder you push. The puzzles I'm actually talking about that this game does right are these rooms that contain several boulders next to each other in a way that you can easily lock yourself out unless you move everything in a specific order. It challenged me unlike any other gym puzzle, and the sheer number of boulders was daunting. But awaiting us at the end of this cave is the Earthquake TM, which is a super strong ground type attack. Also waiting here is the legendary Pokemon, Kyogre. And before we can interact with it at all, Archie shows up for the ultimate showdown. If we win, we can stop him from realizing his dreams of rising the sea level. I want to criticize that this game should have emphasized Archie's plans more, but at the same time, doing that might prevent players from inserting themselves into the story, which, as an adult, I say doesn't matter, but as a kid, I didn't really have a story-driven game where the protagonist speaks what they think, so I'll never know if I would have related to badass white-haired kid more or less if he had dialogue. Maybe if he spoke like Sonic the Hedgehog, this would have been the greatest game in the universe. Look, Archie's a goober for wanting to flood the world, but when I first played the game, he was the boss. He had challenging Pokemon, and for the few appearances he makes, he has presence. So while a lot of people would say that this game's antagonists aren't as fleshed out, sometimes the scariest characters are the ones you don't understand. And what I don't understand is why this man is using super potions still, my lord! If you're just using Blaziken, this battle can be tough. He leads with Mightyena, which has the Intimidate ability that instantly lowers my lead's attack stat, and besides that, he uses Sharpedo and Crobat, which both have a type advantage over Blaziken. Honestly, it's just another reason why this game was made for Torchic, because any balanced team shouldn't have any issues besides potentially being underleveled. And even though we beat Archie, ain't nothing gonna stop him from awakening Kyogre, so he pulls out the red orb. I've talked about how important this game's music is as setting the tone for the story, or giving locations a sense of grandeur. But after Kyogre escapes, there's silence, which has the ability to make scenes more serious. If Kyogre is awake, that means Team Aqua won, and that we failed, but more is revealed as we hear that it started raining outside, and more notably, that the storm is so brutal that it could drown all life on land. Land that Archie wanted to reduce. And once Archie sees it for himself, we get to see and realize that awakening Kyogre was a mistake. That's something I like about Archie. He isn't a sympathetic villain, and he isn't plain evil. But he regrets his actions once he learns that his goal is destructive in nature. I'm kind of a sucker for the be careful what you wish for trope. Too bad he disappears after this. But yeah, the sky is pouring with rain and thunder booms in the background to emphasize Kyogre's power. Unfortunately, the game can't completely express the dire circumstances, but the music helps the situation feel more urgent. Lovely day back home though, and then Steven appears because that's just what he does now and tells us to go to Sootopolis City. So let's return to Route 126. Also, the rain is going to be gone because that's just how I recorded this. In my pursuit to figure out where Dive was, one thing that festered in my mind was this white mountain that, according to the map, has a city on top of it, but there was no foreseeable way to climb it. So once I figured out how to use the HM, I instantly went around this mountain to see if there was some secret entrance. And to my luck, there is. Sootopolis is deserving of the last city in the game. It's a beautiful location featuring ancient-looking houses that surround a calm lake, and it's built inside of an underwater volcano that rose to the surface and filled up with rain, making it habitable as well as showing a perfect balance of land and water, the game's juxtaposing themes. If I could describe the music here, it would be the end of the journey, but we haven't reached the end because the world is in peril. Awaiting us at the back of the city is Steven and the 8th gym leader, Wallace, who were heading toward the Cave of Origin, which is where Kyogre is allegedly hiding. What it's doing there, I don't know, but this cave is sacred and banned to most people, regardless of there being a god whale inside. Since we have the blue orb, Wallace lets me enter, so we spiral down the cave, collect the waterfall HM, and once again, we come face to face with Kyogre. I take legendary Pokemon for granted nowadays, but this battle was a really big deal for me. Every time I wanted to play the game, I had to look at Kyogre's silhouette and the red veins across its body that illuminated the screen. And even though the box art shows what it looks like, the title screen made Kyogre look like it had unimaginable power. I couldn't stop thinking about when I'd get to see this Pokemon, or if I ever would. I even had this keychain on my backpack from a Wendy's kids meal that featured Kyogre, and I would just look at it on the school bus all the time. So imagine my excitement when the time finally came for me to catch Kyogre. Kyogre is best known for its ability Drizzle, which instantly makes it rain when it enters the battlefield, and its version opposite, Groudon, has the ability Drought, which acts the same but makes its skin peel off your face instantly sunny. I mentioned Pokemon Ruby features Team Magma as the antagonists, and their goal is to use Groudon to expand the world's landmass, which translates to evaporating the ocean. I don't think that's as fantastical as wanting to drown the world, that's just a thing mankind is trying to do IRL. But seeing the world become a canyon at the cost of all life on Earth sounds like a fun way to spend a weekend. And you can argue all you want that Groudon has the advantage over Kyogre since its slower speed lets it get weather control. But that boy looking like a shit hydro. Yes, sir!
Yes, sir!
Yes, sir! Yes, sir! So yeah, we restored balance by calming Kyogre with the blue orb and captured it. I'm the kind of guy who refuses to use legendaries in full team playthroughs, but Kyogre is an exception. That being said, I'm not using it for the video. Catching Kyogre also ends the torrential downpours, which is when I think we were intended to hear Sootopolis' song for the first time. And before we take on Wallace for our 8th gym badge, I want to mention that if we return to Mount Pyre, Archie will be there giving the red orb back to the old couple at the summit. It's the end of his story, and it feels hopeful. He witnessed the consequences of his actions and clearly wants to stray away from repeating it, and that's all we get, but that's all we need to see. We don't need to know if Team Aqua was disbanded or what Archie will do next. The conclusion to his story is open-ended, but it leaves me feeling positive about his future. Me, on the other hand, I'm keeping the blue orb. Hasta luego!
Is there?
Sootopolis' gym is iconic to me since it's plotted on an island in the middle of the city, and it's quite fitting too since the gym focuses on water types. The puzzle is 3 floors of ice tiles that crack when you walk on them. The goal is to stand on every tile once because standing on the cracked tiles will drop you into the gym's basement, which only has women in it. Fucking gym has a sex dungeon. I can solve this in my sleep now, but the 3rd floor was one of the toughest puzzles in the game the first time I encountered it. And Wallace is another fair battle when it comes to difficulty. He uses 5 Pokemon, but they're more annoying for their bulk than for their offensive capabilities. I see this battle as an endurance challenge, since you can quickly lose momentum if your Pokemon with super effective attacks get knocked out. And as a Blaziken user, having to gauntlet 5 water types was unnerving, but I don't really remember struggling here like I did with other gym leaders. It's probably because I was like 10 or 15 levels higher than him at the time. But with our 8th and final badge, we can use the Waterfall HM. There's a few waterfalls in the game, but there's only 2 worth noting. The first is east of the Ring Island, which is where we need to go, but I'll get into that one in a bit. So instead, let's head back to Meteor Falls. Inside is a waterfall we can climb up, and beyond it we can find 2 TMs. One for Iron Tail, a strong steel type attack with poor accuracy, and a TM for Dragon Claw, which is a dragon type attack you'll definitely want. There's also a new Pokemon to find in the deepest room of the cave, Bagon. It has a 25% encounter rate, but I was inexplicably unlucky looking for one back in the day, like it would not appear for me. Bagon is a dragon type that gets some of the best stats in the game for a non-legendary, and fun fact, my old YouTube channel used Bagon as a mascot, which might be the weirdest choice since I've never used a Bagon once. In 2009, I found this Pokemon forum called Pokestadium that was primarily known as a place people could upload Pokefusions. Well, this was back when Flygon was my #1 favorite Pokemon, but somebody already had that username, so instead of being Flygon64 or picking another Pokemon I liked, I chose Bagon. This must have been around the point I actually found one, so it was fresh in my mind, but there's some HiJello history for you. I used to go by Bagon. Grande City, our destination. If the music in Sootopolis sounded like you're almost there, this place sounds like you're here. And for a city which consists exclusively of a Pokemon Center, I was excited to see the flowers. They give this location a peaceful air, almost asking you to stop and smell the roses. And you should, because the following cave raises the difficulty some more. Victory Road combines elements from all the generic caves in the game. It's dark, necessitating the use of flash, and if you aren't keeping track of where you've been, you can get lost here pretty easily. The trainers here use strong Pokemon, so you'll want to keep potions and revives on standby, but you know that being prepared wasn't my style as a kid, so I didn't use Flash, and I didn't have any healing items, so this cave made me feel insignificant. There's also a point where you need to use Surf and climb a waterfall, and then go down one right after, and that's an obstacle that literally threw me for a loop, because missing it puts you on a long path that leads right back to the entrance of that floor, so in my head it was a dead end. Now imagine how I felt going through this cave with a weakened Blaziken and a Kyogre, no items to heal them with, unsure of where the exit is, and then this happens. It's Wally, the pushover with the Ralts from the beginning of the game. The last time we saw him, he just had Ralts, but out of nowhere he's got a full team and a vengeance to pay. I'm sure the developers put him here for people like me to get absolutely swasserdonked. You're telling me I had to figure out how to get that far in the cave again and fight this guy? Hell nah, and you know I still wasn't buying potions either. But after Wally is the exit to the cave. Stone roads and tall arches welcome us to the Pokemon League, the building where we can fight the Elite Four and Champion and become the strongest trainer in Hoenn. If you haven't already, load up on 30 revives and hyper potions because the following battles are one after another, and you can't exit to use the Pokemon Center in between any of them. It's also worth bringing Lepa Berries, since those will restore how many times an attack can be used, like Overheat, which I give to Blaziken at this point. It can only be used 5 times unless you find PP ups in the wild, which can boost it to 8. And there isn't much else needed to prepare. If you don't plan on using HMs anymore, traveling to Lilycove to forget those attacks is an option, but chances are good that what you've been doing now will work here. And I suppose if you have any rare candies, this is the best time to use them, since they'll level up your Pokemon. I kept mine just to see if this game could truly be beaten with a team of 6 and no grinding. So let's get to our first member of the Elite Four. Sydney uses Mightyena, Cacturne, Shiftry, Absol, and Sharpedo, which are all dark types, meaning Blaziken and Breloom can go stupid on him, especially since these Pokemon aren't known for their defenses. The only real wrinkle in this battle is his Mightyena's Intimidate, which might screw up your flow, but since his Pokemon are all at levels close to what your team will be, he's not that difficult. Next up is Phoebe, who specializes in ghost types. She uses 2 Banets, 2 Dusclops, and a Sableye. I mentioned that Sableye doesn't have any weaknesses, but the bigger threats are her Dusclops, since they can soak up a lot of attacks. The second one also has a bunch of strong moves, so it can take out your ace when you least expect it. In my Blaziken runs, I was never able to beat Phoebe since I was super stubborn about not spending money on revives, and believe it or not, but I wound up restarting the game again because of this. Wait till you find out how many years it took me to properly beat the game, but I'm glad I couldn't because it always gave me a reason to play. To me, there was always the possibility I'd discover a new Pokemon or location, and that mindset is what kept me engaged for so long. The third member of the Elite Four is where the difficulty really picks up, and it could even be argued that this is the most challenging battle in the game. Okay, maybe second place, but Glacia uses Ice types and repeats Pokemon like Phoebe did, using 2 Glalie and 2 Celio. They're all bulky, so if you don't have any super effective attacks, expect to play around with revives and potions. And her ace is a Walrein which eats attacks and makes me cry. It can paralyze with Body Slam, Surf and Blizzard are strong attacks that most Pokemon don't resist, and Sheer Cold, which has 30% accuracy but insta-kills when it lands. All I recommend is getting a fat water type like Kyogre to switch out to if you need to use revives and potions, because Walrein can sweep teams that have no counters. Last is Drake, who uses Dragon types. I always get worried about this fight since Dragon types are typically beasts, and with the level gap, his team should tear through most Pokemon, but I never had a problem with him like I have with Glacia. He uses 2 Flygon, an Altaria, a Shelgon, and a Salamence, which is a strong looking crew, but I can usually disassemble his team with Swalot and my own Flygon. I typically teach Ice Beam to Swalot for this battle because only one of his Flygons has a super effective attack, but it's Dig, which gives me a free switch into my Flygon that is immune to it. Most of Drake's team also uses Dragon Breath, which is a pretty weak attack that Flygon can survive, which lets me retaliate with a Dragon Claw. All things considered, this battle is still tough. I just happen to like the right Pokemon to make the difficulty balanced. So with the Elite Four defeated, all that stands in our path is the champion. First of all, this song and the battle theme slap. But Steven was a pretty big surprise for me. I always wondered what his purpose was since he appears so many times during our adventure, and while I hadn't expected him to be the final boss, I knew he had strong Pokemon because of this toy I had. I only used this once because I hated it, but it lets you battle the trainer you plug into the back, and one of the opponents was Steven, who uses Aggron and Metagross. Pokemon that look strong, and that's because they are strong. Steven's whole team can kick your ass. He uses the aforementioned Aggron and Metagross, but also a Skarmory, Claydol, Cradily, and Armaldo. Skarmory is his lead, and 9 times out of 10 it will use Spikes, which hurt any Pokemon you send out for battle, which is subtle chip damage that makes a huge difference. Like if you use a Revive but don't heal up, Spike damage can make you feel especially vulnerable. Claydol is one of the biggest defensive walls in the game. It has Reflect and Light Screen, which boosts his defenses temporarily and for his entire team too. If you don't play around it wisely, you can impede your own chances of success because those stat boosts make his already high level team impenetrable. Aggron is strong and defensive, but its 4-time weaknesses to fighting and ground type attacks make it the easiest member of his team to beat. Cradily and Armaldo are wild cards since they can go down quickly, but they're also capable of putting in work if they stay around. They both use Ancient Power, which has a 10% chance of boosting all their stats, but the luck I had this playthrough, it was like 40%. And Metagross, it's level 58, has some of the best stats in the game, and uses 4 powerful attacks, including Psychic, Meteor Mash, Earthquake, and Hyper Beam. This thing here sweeps. That's why if you're using Blaziken, you have to teach it Overheat, otherwise it will be a long endurance challenge. Fuck. Infamously, during my Let's Play I did of this game in 2017, I missed my Overheat and spent 9 minutes healing Pokemon until I could get him to use Hyper Beam, which lets me attack him 1 turn for free. And just note that Kyogre can absolutely sabotage Blaziken, since Rain weakens fire attacks. But that's the battle, and I'm now the champion of Hoenn. I've been waiting to mention how long it took me to beat this game for the first time, because my phrasing throughout the entire video may imply that this took me maybe a few months or a bit longer with all the resets I did. But I played this game for 5 years before I ever beat it. And it's not like I stopped playing for a few years. I legitimately booted up Sapphire weekly. When I couldn't beat it with Blaziken, that's when I started to try out new Pokemon and diversify my experience. They all ended before I could see the credits, but like I said, I was used to playing games just to see how far I could go, and once I realized the importance of revives and potions, it only made me want to play more, since I finally learned that I could beat the game. And what helped my love for this game was that with every subsequent Pokemon game to release, I'd only play once and keep my file as a trophy of sorts. But because of all my resets in Sapphire, I was comfortable replaying this game, so whenever there was a lull in between Pokemon games, I'd return to Sapphire to get my Pokemon fill. So when I'm asked what my favorite video game is, it's easily Pokemon Sapphire. There is no other game I have as big of a history with, and this is coming from a guy who will pop off to just the idea of playing Mario Party. Consider checking out my Mario Party reviews after this video, but let's talk post-game. In modern times, people complain about Pokemon games lacking content to play after the champion, and I'm always like, wait, there's more? Because I always assumed this game was done after the champion. Like, if you came up to me last year and said this game has a battle tower, I would tell you, no, you're thinking about Emerald, because I straight up didn't know this existed. When we load up the game after becoming champion, we're back in our bedroom, and Dad gives us a ticket for the ferry in Lilycove, and for some reason, I just never went there. I've been using the official guide while I recorded gameplay, and when I saw this page, I was like, what? Because I forgot about the ticket. But the Battle Tower is a location that kinda eases you into competitive Pokemon, but not really. The format is 3 vs 3 and has a level 50 option and a level 100 option. I grinded my team up to level 50 for this because it gives me the fairest shot, and also worth noting is that any Pokemon above level 50 will then be ineligible. It makes sense, but later games temporarily lower your Pokemon's level to 50 during this mode, making this game's version unplayable if your team is in the 51 to 60 range, which isn't unlikely. And the battles themselves are cool because it lets you see the final evolution to every Pokemon in the game. This was my first time seeing front sprites for Wigglytuff and Rhydon in-engine, because there aren't any trainers elsewhere that use them. But the battles are kinda underwhelming. I was leading Gardevoir with Swalot and Flygon as 2 and 3, and they were on a streak. The only Pokemon this trio struggles against is Swampert, but my run ended because of a Destiny Bond Gardevoir. I got 34 wins in a row, but my goal was 50, since it would have rewarded me with an item for my secret base. I also enjoy that this mode uses the sentence maker I've mentioned a couple times now. You can make your own greeting, but I like that the trainers you face all have their own sentence too, like, I have rough skin! I need natural care! And, have you a stench or a sweet scent? I would say that the e-reader cards were like this mode, but I couldn't exactly explain that without fully talking about the Battle Tower. And all in all, the Battle Tower is kinda lame after you've done it once, but it beats the e-reader cards by a long shot, especially with how convenient this mode is. And since I mentioned that the ticket to get here was received from my parents, one other post-game thing you can learn of at home is through the TV. It mentions a red Pokemon flying around the region. Pokemon games like to feature legendary Pokemon that move from route to route, which sounds like a cool idea because you can be minding your own business in Route 102 and boom, a legendary Pokemon appears, but this is by far the worst feature in the series. The problem starts with the encounter being totally random, but there are steps you can take to speed up the process. Start by buying repels and going to Route 110. Also make sure your lead Pokemon is level 20 or 30-ish, because repels don't work on Pokemon that are a higher level than your lead, and the legendary is level 40. Then you just walk in the grass outside the Southern Cycling Road building for 5 seconds, and if you didn't get a wild encounter, go back inside the building to reset the legendary's location. I'll get into the math in a bit, but this process should work after 5 minutes. So there's Latias, a Psychic Dragon type, but because it's a roaming Pokemon, it runs away after one turn. That means you have to encounter it multiple times to chip away its health, or throw one Pokeball. Whatever you do, just don't knock it out. And now that you've seen it, you can open up the Pokedex to see its current location. So now when you come out of the cycling building, you can check to see if Latias is around on the map, and you can also stop using repels because of this. But this is where things go from bad to worse, because at red health and with an Ultra Ball, you have roughly a 2% chance of catching Latias. Also, that 5-minute encounter rate is still in effect, so in an hour of playing you could get 20 opportunities, but you could also get 4. The odds are a bit in your favor because Latias won't appear in a third of the routes, making it have something like a 5% chance of being in your route during a reset. And if it takes 15 seconds to check the Pokedex and reset Latias, you should theoretically get an encounter once every 5 minutes. But this game fucking hates me. I didn't record most of this hunt, but it took me 8 hours, and during hour 6 I got 1 encounter. 1! That's why I don't like roaming legendaries. The good news is that every other legendary we catch is fun to find. The big one I gotta mention is Rayquaza, who was the trifecta to Kyogre and Groudon, and also the leading legendary of Pokemon Emerald. After becoming champion, a path opens up in Route 131 to Sky Pillar. Since I didn't do post-game ever, I never explored this place until I learned about it on the internet a year or 2 after I beat the game. And conceptually, I love the idea of a monolith in the ocean. Honestly, just put any ancient architecture in the ocean and I'm sold. But this tower requires the Mach Bike to explore because the floor is so brittle that it'll break when you step on it, but the Mach Bike is fast enough to escape danger. Except I wasn't coordinated, so I'd keep falling. There's only 2 floors you need to do this, but I gave up, and what you're witnessing right now is my first time battling Rayquaza. I think it says a lot that I can miss all the post-game content and still consider this my favorite game of all time. Would it have been cool to experience these Pokemon and the Battle Tower for the first time when I was as starry-eyed as I was back in the day? Well, of course. I'd imagine Rayquaza would be one of my favorite Pokemon if I did, but instead I see all the post-game content much differently. With Kyogre, I mentioned that I take legendary Pokemon for granted nowadays, and since my first time seeing these Pokemon is now instead of in the past, I see them with critical eyes. And the truth is, legendary Pokemon aren't fun to catch. It makes sense that the powerful mythical Pokemon would be hard to obtain, but when you fail, you don't learn anything. The only way to increase your odds of winning the lottery is to buy more tickets. Well, in Pokemon, you're playing one ticket at a time. Sometimes your number will get drawn right away, while other times it takes hours, maybe even never. I just can't get excited for legendary Pokemon anymore unless they're implemented really well. And fortunately, Pokemon Sapphire's got that. Route 134 contains a pool of water you can dive in whenever you want. This isn't post-game, and it leads to a tunnel with a wall featuring strange markings on it. It's Braille, which is something I learned about when I was 6, but had no reason to remember it, so I had no clue what these dots meant. The game just barely makes it possible to naturally solve the series of puzzles I'm about to unveil, but it starts by assuming you'll swim to the surface right above the inscription which says "Go up here." The following room has a bunch of stones with Braille on them, and I want to know one person who doesn't know Braille but understand that these were showing off the alphabet, because there's no way anyone could figure that out, especially the periods and commas. The guidebook I've been using doesn't decode any of the Braille, but it does provide a key for the alphabet, so I've been using that to decipher everything. At the back of this room, the Braille says "Dig here," which means you need a Pokemon with Dig in your party. Hopefully you got the TM, because the only Pokemon that learn the move naturally are Nincada and Trapinch, who both learn it past level 40. And just a heads up, you'll need Fly and Strength too. The next room has a bunch of sentences. The back has the next clue while everything else is world building. The clue says, first comes Relicanth, last comes Wailord. So now you gotta go catch a Relicanth and a Wailmer, then raise the Wailmer to level 40 to evolve into a Wailord, then come back and put Relicanth in the lead and Wailord in slot 6. Then doors open somewhere else, but if you've been paying attention to the map, this will be an easy puzzle to solve. In 3 routes, there's this rock formation I've kept a secret until now. There's one in Route 105, 111, and 120. The first time you'll see this is probably in the desert, and then by the second one it might seem familiar. The bigger hint that something is hidden in these routes is that they all have a Ruin Maniac near these formations. But let's start with Route 105. It says, S, T, O... Stop A, stop A, stop A-N, stop and W, stop and Wa, stop and wait, looks like wait again, stop and wait, F, O, Fo, for, stop and wait for, maybe they should have made the puzzle anything else, because the code is stop and wait for time to pass twice, which translates to stay still for 2 minutes. And inside is a golem looking Pokemon, Regice. As you'd expect, it's an Ice type, and design-wise, it's my favorite of the 3 legendary Pokemon hiding in these caves. Statistically, you can't go wrong with any of these. Their defenses are great, attack is meh, but Regice has a good special attack stat, so its Ice attacks can pack a wallop. The next cave we'll go to is the Desert one, and its code is right, down, then use Strength. And inside is Regirock, who, as you can probably guess, is a rock type. It's the opposite of Regice, trading its physical attack and physical defense with its special attack and special defense stats. Last is the cave in Route 120. Its code is, with new time, hope, and love, aim to the sky in the middle. This is the hardest code since aim to the sky doesn't exactly sound like use fly, but since there's been so much reliance on using HMs and field attacks, it's not a stretch for one to be used here. And the legendary awaiting us is Registeel, a steel type. Statistically, it's the happy medium between Regice and Regirock, featuring attack and defense stats equal to the average of the other 2 golems. The jack of all trades, but master of none, except its stats are still better than 90% of the Pokemon in the game, and being a steel type instantly makes it better defensively. So those are the legendary Pokemon. There's a few others, but I have no means to obtain them. Latios, the version exclusive to Ruby, can only be caught in this game with an Eon ticket, which is an e-reader card given away in special promotions around the game's release. Latios is mostly identical to Latias, but trades some defense for offense. Deoxys, which is actually unobtainable in these games, is a psychic type that has 4 different forms that specialize in a different stat. My main impression of this Pokemon is from the movie Destiny Deoxys, which I barely remember the plot to, but Deoxys was insanely powerful in it. Jirachi can be obtained, but only through GameCube games I don't own. It's a psychic steel type and can grant anyone's wishes. And while it isn't a legendary, there's one more Pokemon we can get in post-game, and it just so happens to be another psychic steel type. Beldum, the pre-evolution to Metagross, who was Steven's signature Pokemon. Metagross is absolutely worth having on your team, but since it's post-game, there's no reason to raise one, and Beldum is kind of annoying to level up since it only learns Takedown, which is a self-harming attack. I mean, you're probably just going to use the experience share, but it's interesting how comparable it is to Ralts in the early game. You can get Beldum by returning to Steven's house once you've beaten him. He left a note saying we can take him, but that boy's going straight in the box. So that's every Pokemon in the game now. I've never tried filling the entire Pokedex, but over my dozens of playthroughs, I've caught every Pokemon you can find in the wild, so that's gotta count for something. Why not is level 40, by the way? And I know you've all been very patient waiting to hear me talk about Pokemon contests, so let's get into that. Contests are some of the best episodes in the anime. There, I said it. But in-game, it's a surprisingly deep side mode. Contests exist in 5 categories: cool, tough, cute, smart, and beauty. They all play the same, but they differ because every attack in the game is labeled under one of those 5 traits. If you're doing a smart contest, you'll want to use smart attacks, but as I'll explain later, having a diverse move pool can be strategically beneficial. I'm going to use Armaldo since it's honorary team member number 7, but before I even bring my Claw Fossil to Rustboro to revive Anorith, I need to plan out what I want it to specialize in. For attacks, I settled on teaching it Scratch, Harden, Fury Cutter, and Ancient Power. 3 of these attacks are tough, so I'll be entering in tough contests. But before I even try to enter a contest, I need to go on a long tangent about berries and Pokeblocks. When I mentioned them at the Safari Zone, I said that Pokemon would prefer certain types of Pokeblocks based on their nature. So before reviving Anorith, I saved so I could get one with a nature that likes Pokeblocks that improve its toughness. And what the nature does in contests is strengthen or weaken the effectiveness of Pokeblocks. So I got an Armaldo with a relaxed nature. It likes sour berries, which boost a Pokemon's tough stat, so now I need to feed him Pokeblocks with that flavor to improve his sheen or something, I don't know. A Spare and Pineapple berries are what I'm looking for, but to turn them into Pokeblocks, I need to use the berry blender inside the contest halls. I love the Berry Blender. It's a timing minigame and I could play it for hours. Before I got the game, my family went camping one time and some kids my sister and I met were blending berries. And I had no idea this was Pokemon, so when I saw this one in the game, my head went spinning. Your success with the blender dictates what the Pokeblock will look like. It has 2 stats and a color to consider. The color determines what contest category the stat will boost. Sour berries turn yellow, so that's what I'm looking for. But there's also the level and feel of the Pokeblocks too. The level of a Pokeblock raises that category's stat, and the feel fills up a meter that, once full, prevents you from feeding your Pokemon ever again. The berries you find early in the game have a lower level, so for that reason alone, it's best to wait until you've explored the entire region. And I mentioned that the e-reader cards have their own berries, and these produce Pokeblocks with an even higher level. And before I forget, the level stat also has a cap. I mentioned Feebas needs to eat blue Pokeblocks to evolve, but it will only do so if its beauty stat is maxed out. So why are these stats important? Well, contests feature 2 rounds, and the first is an appeal to the audience, which is completely determined by your stats from eating Pokeblocks. If you don't use any Pokeblocks, you'll get 0 points from this round, and considering that round 2 relies on a lot of luck, you'll want to max out whatever stat you're going for. In round 2, you're appealing to a judge against 3 other Pokemon. It's pretty chaotic, but it has its highs and lows. All 4 Pokemon choose an attack to present, and this is where the strategy comes in, because every attack has different properties. Scratch, for instance, gives me 4 points, while Fury Cutter will give 3. At first glance, it may appear that picking attacks that give out a lot of hearts are the way to go, but there's a lot of attacks that disrupt your opponents and can make them lose points or even skip their turn. This is why I use Harden, which cancels out 1 disruption the turn it's used. I also have Ancient Power, which is this set's bread and butter. It only gives me 1 point, but every attack used after it will receive an extra point. So Scratch can get 5 points now, and this effect can be used twice, meaning I can get an extra 6 points if I use it on turns 1 and 3. I'd say using disruptive attacks is probably a better strategy, but these attacks were working for me. And I mentioned earlier that you don't have to use attacks that specialize in the category you're entered in, and it's actually a viable but risky strategy. If a tough attack is used in a tough contest, this meter fills up and whatever Pokemon makes it completely full gets a lot of points. Well, if there's 2 slots left, you know damn well the first guy isn't going to use a tough attack because that's free points for the guy after him. And that guy knows that the first guy won't give him free points, so if he's a fool, he could give the third person points. It turns the game into a tactical playground, since a move like Fury Cutter, which is a cool attack, doesn't raise the meter in tough contests, and what makes it handy is I can use the attack multiple times in a row without getting penalized. If an attack is used twice in a row, the judges will take points away from you. Another penalty they give out is if a cute or beautiful attack is used, which won't take points away from the user, but instead reduces the meter by a point, so the higher ranked you become, the more likely it is that you'll never see this fill up. And with all the preparations I did, Armaldo took over the scene very easily. I mentioned in Lilycove's art museum that you can get paintings of your Pokemon inserted if you get a certain score in the Master Rank contests, but since the AI likes to disrupt and prevent the meter from filling up, I wasn't able to get enough points to show this off. If you get a painting for a Pokemon in every contest category, the curator will give you a trophy for your secret base. And with that, we've reached the end of our journey through Pokemon Sapphire. Look, I've already gone on and on for hours, gushing about tiny details and design choices I love, but that's because this game really showed me what video games were capable of. Most of the stuff I played before getting a Game Boy were party games, and games where I'd run into roadblocks I could never overcome. So when I got this game, and I'm actually able to make progress, it gave me a sense of confidence that I could beat challenging things. And I totally ignored it, but I think Pokemon being an RPG was the perfect type of game for someone as inexperienced as myself. I didn't have to worry about being coordinated or understanding a Z-axis, because Pokemon is a game where you walk from tile to tile, and in combat you just pick the attack you want to use. There is no precision, and that's just what I needed compared to all the other games I was playing. I said this game's motto was, right place at the right time, and even its release date followed that for me. It couldn't have come into my life at a better time. If you've made it this far, let me know in the comments what your favorite video game is, what memories you've made with it, and how it challenged you and made you grow. But that's gonna be it for me. Thank you for watching the video. Feel free to leave a like as it will help the channel grow, and subscribe to get updates on my uploads as soon as they happen. But until then, I will see you all next time.